Today, and I brought the book simply to utilize the maps. And y'all are probably familiar with them. And I saw several of you with the books. You use those if you wanted to, but just to give you kind of an idea of where we are on this map, and Tony can zoom in. We're at the Crisp House here, which is the headquarters of Ulysses S. Grant. When he arrives. Now the Union Army will march in, of course, whether it's on the Telegraph Road or the Ridge Road. And I intended yesterday we were going to come back and see a little bit of the historic road, through that area between here and Fort Henry and Fort Donelson, or between here and Fort Henry. We took a different route though. He went by the Visitor Center and land between the lakes. But they'll come in down this valley of Hickman Creek here. As you see on the map here, there's a mill just right across the creek, Rowlett's Mill, and this is the Crisp House. Now, the actual Fort Donelson, as you know, is the water battery fort. And, the water batteries are down along the river. The fort is there to defend the water batteries. And then you have the outer defenses that the Confederate infantry will man. And I may already have a tick on me. Something's crawling on me. To just a little bit about the lay of the land, there are three major creeks that you need to know about. It's a little bit different than Shallow. Shallow, you got Owl Creek and Lick Creek that kind of define the parameters. Well, with the Cumberland River flowing basically at this point, we're right at the bend, the great bend of the Cumberland, and it'll flow essentially east-west at this point. So everything is oriented east and west rather than north and south. And normally we think about, Fort Henry's on North and South River, and we think Fort Donelson's on the North and South River, but it makes this great bend, and kind of everything is east and west. The farthest creek to the west is Hickman Creek, this is the valley of Hickman Creek right here. Just a little bit farther to the east will be Indian Creek, and that's where we saw yesterday when we met Superintendent McCutcheon at the National Cemetery. That was down, we crossed the valley of Indian Creek, and we'll see more of that today. And then farther over toward, of course, the east is Lick Creek, and we'll see a lot of that today as well. That's the famous one that Nathan Bedford Forrest crossed, saddle deep in water and all that. So as these creeks kind of flow out, it'll form kind of the different sectors of the battlefield, and so you get Confederate outer defenses between first section between Hickman and Indian, the second section between Indian and basically Lick Creek here, encompassing also the town of Dover there. So we'll see a whole lot more about that as we go along. Now, one warning, I think this is a good place to do it, is that this is not Shallow. This is not Gettysburg, this is not Vicksburg, where you can go to the exact point and say, this is where so-and-so's headquarters were, this is where the 28th Illinois was, this is where so-and-so happened, and all of that. Fort Donelson is a second generation battlefield. The first generation was created, Chickamauga. Well, how did I leave out Chickamauga? I don't know how we did that.
Most people do.
But, starting early this morning. But those five battlefields, the original five, were established in the 1890s, and it was critical because you had veterans that were still around that could come back and say, this is where A.P. Stewart's division attacked, on September the 20th or whatever. By the time this second generation of battlefields are established, in the late we actually do get traffic out here, the late 1920s, how many Civil War veterans are still around in the 1920s, late 20s and 30s? Yeah. They're not a whole lot, certainly not as many as were in the 1890s, and if they are still around in the 1920s, they're probably starting to lose a little bit of their memory and so on. So certainly not many of them can travel back to the battlefields and determine where important points were and all that kind of stuff. So you get, and it's not a knock against Fort Donelson or anything like that. If anything, it's a knock against Congress. We all can rail against Congress about anything. There were actual bills to establish Fort Donelson National Military Park, Perryville National Military Park, Franklin National Military Park. All of these battlefields were supposed to have national military parks in the 1890s or early 1900s, but Congress didn't pass them. And if they had, of course, the veterans could have come back and marked those just like they marked them at Shiloh and Gettysburg. Wouldn't that be nice if we could come to Fort Donelson marked like Shiloh and know where specifically everything is? So this will be a refrain you'll hear over and over today. Now, we're not exactly sure about this. We're not exact, but this is the general area that's interpreted. This is where we think, this is where the Park Service thinks best, you know, evidence and
we had
so on.
In my March seminar, we had a very interesting moment where we talked about exactly that. We were exploring as part of the Kelly Field line, and I brought out some conflicting evidence that this brigade was here, these regiments were here, these other guys say they weren't, and then of course Ogden was there too, and we talked. The most important factor is what we don't have, which was the veterans themselves. They put those regimental markers for a reason,
right?
And it really does notice that you do notice the difference, don't you?
and if there's not one at Chickamauga, just like at Shiloh, it doesn't mean there weren't troops there. It just does. It means that in Shiloh's example, that David W. Reed could not document exactly where they were.
Right.
So rather than putting something wrong, he chose not to put anything, even though everybody knows there were troops there. You just didn't want to mark it and it be not 100% correct and lead everybody, you know, astray or something. So the crisp house here is a classic example, and I don't know, the Park Service may have done more recent excavations or who knows what, but I don't know exactly where the crisp house sat, and I don't think anybody did.
Yeah, it's somewhere back there, allegedly.
You could think, obviously on high ground. I mean, you're not going to put it down in the where it washes and so on. But you know, something like that is you know, up to speculation a little bit, as will be some of the lines and where the troop positions are, especially when we get to the breakout point. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But this is Ulysses S. Grant's headquarters area. We'll define it that way. And this is where he stays, of course, in the cabin with his staff and generals in and out and so on. This is where the famous episode takes place, where on the night of the 15th, C.F. Smith brings in word that, hey, or very early on the morning of the 16th, they're wanting to surrender, and Smith tells them, you know, no terms to the traitors and all that. And Grant says, how's this? No, you know, no terms except unconditional and immediate surrender. And Smith says that ought to do. You know, so,
propose to move immediately.
Propose to move immediately upon your words.
Same thing in smoother words.
Yeah. But so that would happen here at the crisp house. So a very historic point right here. Now, what we're going to do from here on is start on the park, and we will basically go down the lines overlooking Hickman Creek. The Confederate lines, I want to kind of just lay out the Confederate defensive lines, these outer works that we talked about, and then we'll start in on the various attacks against those, starting with February the 13th, and then the gunboats later, of course, and then especially the 15th, and we'll hit those. So we'll probably get out a couple more times along the Confederate works just to orient you and so on. So that's kind of the plan of what we'll do for the next little bit.
The concrete bases here?
Cannonballs
They
here.
said it was cannonballs there.
Yeah.
I don't
According
remember
to
myself.
the archival stuff.
Okay.
Yep.
There are pictures of them and so on.
Yep.
Has anybody ever figured out maybe trying to use like GPR or something to see if they could find a trace of the crisp farmhouse or anything like that?
I'm not.
Geiger counter.
I don't know whether they've had anything out here like that or not.
GPR can be hit or miss, especially if it's like a log house that doesn't have a deep foundation, but it could still find it. What you need is a school with an archaeology department that would pair up and you know, do a teaching project.
But it's kind of needle in a haystack kind of thing. I mean, it could be anywhere on this.
Well, that little
out
note.
here, and finding something like
where
that
that
would be.
Could be right where.
Yeah,
the
it could
house
be.
is.
You
Right
could
under
run
the
a
foundation.
sled on this hillside, and it would take you several hours, potentially. Yeah, it could.
Could be anywhere up in there. I have blue and gray maps for the 13th. I know some of you were here the other day. I handed them out to most everybody.
Oh, you got it. All right.
That's the same one I gave out, but I know Tony joined in. That's the same one you got the other day, Ken.
Sadly, that's in my.
Where we are on the map, we're over here again. That's the valley of Hickman Creek. We're at the very right of the Confederate earthworks. Right to number 3 there. We will be held by the 2nd Kentucky, variously at times with other portions of regiments in here. When everybody moves over to the extreme left to make that flank attack on the 15th, of course, it'll be very thinly held here by those Kentuckians. So you see where we are. So the Confederate lines will start here, and they'll wind around. We're going to just go to Graves. Actually, has everybody been to Graves? No, we did on our tour. Is everybody? Probably, again, each group is different, and we can start a little deeper on some groups. So I don't know that there's actually any need to even go by Graves. Didn't you say y'all started there the day Thursday when you?
We were here. Me, Dave, Pat, and Andy were here
4 years ago.
Yeah.
We parked over there and then shuttled.
Okay.
Yeah, we walked along the whole detached line out there.
Right. So it'll go down in the valley from Graves there. We'll just cover that part while we're here, and we'll have to stop there. It goes down in the valley of Indian Creek, and then up that big tall hill where Maney's Battery is, of course, that some of you hiked Thursday. Y'all have been up to Maney's, though.
We have.
We did
Not
it 4 years ago.
Oh, you were
But
part of
yeah,
the
we
4 years
definitely
ago.
have.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see that from a little bit different angle in just a little bit. Then it crosses Aaron Hollow, go down into another one of these deep things, and then back up to the French's Battery position where it's marked in the park. And then it goes on down the ridge overlooking Barn Hollow, and that's where there's a little bit of, not sure exactly how far the Confederate lines went. This map actually shows, in a little bit lighter red there, that it probably went a little bit on farther than what is maybe marked today in the
almost to the
park.
old church road. Here
Old
on
Charlotte
this.
Road, yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously that would make sense to I mean, you don't, if you're going to leave a gap in your defenses, the flank's probably not the place to do it. You don't want a gap anywhere, but just ask the French. They had this nice Maginot line and all that. And of course, the Germans just go right around it and Belgium and all that. But so it would make sense that these lines extended on farther down where the current thinking is has put them. So, thinking bigger picture, was it really necessary, given the roughly 18,000 or so Confederate troops inside Fort Donelson? Was it necessary to man this whole line? Would they have been better off just to do like the Federals later did, as Brian talked about yesterday, concentrate on a smaller front and hold that well, maybe between Hickman and Indian Creek? Would it have been better to do that? Why are they holding Dover? Why have you got to hold Dover? Well, that's the steamboat landing. Could you outflank this position if the Federals, the whole intention, of course, when the Federals fan out farther to the east there, is to get a lodgment on the Cumberland River to stop traffic, Confederate traffic, to reinforce Fort Donelson or to bring in supplies and all that. That's what McClernand is after, actually. So, I wonder if they'd have been a little bit better served to just forget Dover for the time being and cover the river batteries just between Hickman and Indian Creek. Of course, that also relieves the chance that you may get out by the Forge Road, which you don't have access to the Forge Road now once you do get out. We'll talk about kind of the larger context, a little bit of why we're even at Fort Donelson as well. Well, it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and do that here. To pick up yesterday, of course, when Fort Henry falls, Phelps leads those gunboats down into the bowels of the Confederacy, really. And this poses a major problem for Albert Sidney Johnston, who's still in Bowling Green at this point. And they begin the retreat, of course, well, it actually starts on February 11th, I believe, but the decision is made on February the 7th. And so the focus becomes, of course, Fort Donelson. And so just like at Fort Henry really wasn't important. The railroad bridge was important. Same thing here, not necessarily is Fort Donelson important, but what's important? What is Fort Donelson covering?
Clarksville and Nashville.
Clarksville and Nashville especially. And what's important at Nashville? Well, lots of things, obviously, but
factories, any major supply.
political, geopolitical, not tactically, but maybe operationally, strategically, what's important?
Albert Sidney Johnson's got to get over.
The bridges there that will allow Albert Sidney Johnston and the Army in central Kentucky to move south of the south of the Cumberland River. So Johnson realizes right off the bat, we've got to get south of the Cumberland River. And the way to do that, of course, is to not be interfered with by those gunboats, just like our conversation, where was it, yesterday, about Florence and Decatur and the bridges and Bear Creek and all of that. Making a crossing at Nashville will be well nigh impossible with ironclads there watching you. You know, they're going to disrupt any crossing there between Edgefield and Nashville. So it becomes paramount that Fort Donelson hold out long enough for Albert Sidney Johnston to get the army south of the Cumberland River. And Johnson, of course, never intends to sacrifice Fort Donelson. We want those troops. In fact, he sends Pillow and Floyd actually messages, hey, if you can't hold the fort, march out the old Charlotte Pike and come to Nashville. Come join me at Nashville. So he's thinking maybe even a temporary defense of Fort Donelson because it's obviously going to be outflanked. It already is outflanked. I mean, the Federal's farther south than Fort Donelson. And so hold long enough for us to get across the Cumberland and then move down. Ultimately, we'll have to get south of the Tennessee River as well. Now, here's the problem with Johnson, of course, and this is one of the things I'm beginning to really fault him on. He never comes here to superintend this himself. You would think the crisis point would deserve your full attention, right? And in fact, in terms of his, I give him a little bit of a pass in terms of subordinates and all of that. His subordinates just do not serve him very well at all. For instance, Leonidas Polk, who was his roommate at West Point. I don't think Johnson's ever really able to stand up to Polk and to really command him as a peer. He's a buddy, and he has a little bit of trouble when he gives Polk orders to, for instance, send Pilla to Clarksville to help cover these twin rivers. What does Polk say? No, I can't spare these guys at Columbus. We're about to be attacked. Every other day we're about to be attacked. We're about to be attacked. I can't spare them, so I'm not sending them. And Johnson says, well, okay, that's fine. I'll countermand my order. I mean, who else?
Hurt.
Do what?
They might get hurt.
Yeah. Who else would he have, treated like that? So Polk is a problem. Zollicoffer and Crittenden are problems. Zollicoffer, and there is a pattern here, of course. Polk, is he a military man?
Not really.
He graduated West Point, but he immediately resigned and went into the ministry, of course, and just came back on a kind of a whim, and because Jefferson Davis asked him. And in fact, I hit this a little bit hard in the new book on Johnston. Polk actually got mad at kind of the way he's treated and so on a little bit, and resigned in, I think it was like November or so.
If that resignation had been accepted.
I'd say that's one of the worst decisions that Jefferson Davis ever made, was not accepting that resignation. But Jefferson Davis talked him out of it, and Polk stayed, and it was an issue. So I don't know that there are many Polk supporters. Have you read the new biography of Polk? I have not read it. I've read portions of it that were germane to what I'm doing, but
it's very good. It goes into a lot of detail of Polk's life, and it brings out a lot of things. It's not a military biography per se.
Yeah. Is it apologetic to Polk?
No.
Okay, so
it's pretty straight on forward.
Okay.
It treats him sympathetically in places, but then every Civil War character can be treated sympathetically.
Oh, yeah.
Every general in the war, I don't care who they are, I make the argument, you can pick a day where they do really well, and you pick a day where they just completely blow it. And there's not a single general in the war that you can't find those highs and lows in. And that's part of that is simply because of the unevenness of military education prior to the Leavenworth reforms and all of the stuff that comes in after the Spanish-American War.
Root reforms and all that.
Yeah. So it's a good book. It's not especially heavy on military analysis and judgment, but we cover some of that. And he's not afraid to call Polk an idiot.
Okay. Well,
when Polk is doing bad things.
The common consensus is that Polk is not a very good general. And he does not serve Albert C. Johnson very well. Zollicoffer, what's the history of Zollicoffer? Newspaper guy, blind as a bat, newspaper guy. Politician. Is he much on the military? Does he know much about the military? No. Crittenden, George Crittenden. What's his history? Man, you know?
A lot of drinking.
Drunk guy.
Well, he's from Kentucky.
Son of the John J. Crittenden, the heir apparent to Henry Clay from Kentucky, you know, and the so-called Crittenden Compromise, and you know, they had brother general in the Union Army, but
The Union got the better Crittenden.
yeah, they got the better deal in that. John Floyd. What's John Floyd? Governor of Virginia, Secretary of War. Is he much military? Does he know what he's doing?
Nobody can't
Potentially
capture.
treasonous.
That's right.
That'll be bad.
Gideon Pilla.
Superstar.
He does have some military
Experience.
but
Because of his friendship with Polk.
yeah, with Polk. Not you know, he caused problems during the Mexican War. He caused problems during this war, and he's kind of the alter ego a little bit of Polk. And I think a lot of the nudging that and the backdraft that Polk gives Johnston comes from Pilla. I think Pilla's nudging Polk. Oh, we can do this. We can do this. You know, we got to concentrate on Columbus here. You know, and
He nudges Polk into the Columbus move.
yeah, exactly. So, you know, looking at his his subordinates, Johnston just doesn't have a lot to work with. Who are his best subordinates?
Claiborne, Hardy.
Claiborne will come later on,
Yeah,
of course, but he's still a colonel at
Buckner.
this point.
Right now,
William
Buckner
J.
and
Hardy?
Johnson.
Yeah.
Who's Hardy? What's his pedigree and all that?
West Point military.
West Point.
Served.
Hardy's tactics had been major in Albert Sidney Johnson's 2nd Cavalry in Texas and all. I mean, he knows what he's doing. Who else is there?
Buckner.
With Buckner,
Yeah.
West Point. You know, all of that. Claiborne, Heinemann, some of those guys. And so the problem is, who does Johnston stay with during this whole crisis? He stays with Claiborne and Hardy and Heinemann, his best folks, and leaves the crisis point and everything else to
Leaves essentially a command vacuum.
idiots. Exactly. He should have spread things out a little bit, and you know, a lot of people argue he should have come here himself, but he doesn't. He keeps funneling in troops, and first of all, of course, we have Bushrod Johnson, who's the Bushrod Johnson guy.
I don't know if I call him a guy, but you know.
Bushrod, he's
he's
an
here first.
interesting character.
Yeah.
He had been, I believe, West Point, had taught at the Nashville Military School, and so on. So, I mean, he knows kind of what he's doing. Then Pilla.
But he's from Ohio.
Mexican War.
Yeah,
He's from Ohio. And there's a great newspaper article that they thought he was captured here at Fort Donelson, and
Well, he was.
yeah, sort of he was, but it shows up in his hometown Ohio paper. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he's better off, or we won't give him back or something because he's a traitor, because we didn't want him anyway since he became a traitor or something. I forget exactly what it was.
His family was already on the outfit, and he's a Quaker.
Quaker, yeah,
Yeah.
he's a military.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He has to be officially shunned.
Yeah.
He's been shunned since he was
And then he had
in
that
his teens.
Yeah.
financial before the
Episode.
war troubles. Yeah.
Well, he had the quartermaster issue in Mexico.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why he was why he resigned. Prior to being cashiered.
Told to resign, basically.
All right, so then Polk is sent in on, I think, like the 9th. I believe the 9th. Then Buckner and his troops that have been sent to the area are sent in about the 11th. I may be getting my days mixed up. By the 13th, Floyd himself is here, and Floyd is the ranking officer. But Floyd is having doubts about even holding Fort Donelson, and he wants to hold Cumberland City in Clarksville. And in fact, he will go, or actually he will call Buckner to him and tell Buckner, get out of Fort Donelson, we're evacuating. And Pilla will get to Buckner before Floyd will. and Pillow will talk Buckner into staying, and then Pillow will have that influence over Floyd. And we see that several times. We'll see it in the breakout attempt, how Floyd will decide something. Buckner will tell him, let's do this. This is the sound military thing to do. And Floyd will say, yeah, you're right, let's do that. And then Pillow will come in and say, no, we need to do it like this. And Floyd will always side with Pillow, who doesn't know what he's doing. And as a result, we obviously see that. So it's a big mess. Pillow and Buckner don't get along. There's political issues there in the Tennessee, Kentucky, politics, and you think the SEC football game's bad. They're big time politics. I think it stems back to like an 1858 Senate race and so on. So there's a lot of big trouble going on in the Confederate High Command here. But by the 13th, John B. Floyd, of all people, is in charge here at Fort Donelson, when probably Albert Sidney Johnston should have been. When I do talks and so on, I used to talk about the Three Stooges at Fort Donelson, and I had to amend that just a little bit. In fact, I was proud to report that I amended it when I went to the Kansas City Civil War Roundtable. Have you ever spoken to the Kansas City folks? The president, and when I was there last couple of years ago, was a guy named, I think, Chip Buckner, I think it was Chip. And his daddy was there as well, and they were the grandson and the great-grandson of Simon Bolivar Buckner. And you all know the story about Simon Bolivar Buckner. His son, long generations, of course, was killed on Okinawa, and his son was in the Army in World War II and heard about his father's death. The lieutenant general heard about his father's death reading a newspaper in the train station in Chicago, if I understand it correctly. And so that son is now, I think he's like in his 90s or something, but he still attends the round table and so on. So, and then I believe it was his son was the president that gives. But anyway, I was proud to report to them that I had revised my opinion of the Three Stooges, and Buckner was no longer a stooge. It was just the Two Stooges now, Pillow and Floyd, because I honestly, to goodness, think that if anybody knew what they were doing here, it was Buckner. But the problem, it may be Bushrod Johnson, your guy there. I keep calling him your guy. But
yeah, he's become my guy for some reason.
The problem with Bushrod is that nobody listens to him.
Nobody.
He's not even invited to some of these councils of war. We don't even need you. So nobody really even pays him attention. Certainly the Federals don't. Once it's over, he just kind of walks away. They don't want me, so I'll
They don't even give an order to retreat.
Yeah, exactly.
Ignoring him. It's amazing.
So we've got major command trouble here. Wishy-washiness whether to even hold Fort Donelson or not, and discussions about, well, is Johnston's army across the Cumberland yet? If they are, we can get out of here. We can leave. Those occur when we're dealing with the surrender negotiations on the morning of the 16th. So major command troubles here, but in the meantime, of course, who's paying the price of all this? It's these soldiers out on these front lines right here, where you see these entrenchments here. And of course, the big problem comes when it starts to have a major cold front move through on the night of the 13th, and wind comes out of the north, and it starts to snow and sleet and rain and wind blowing like crazy, and it becomes just absolutely miserable for everybody. So
What are you going to do with that?
Do what?
I asked you about Buell and Johnston's attitude toward Buell. It has been my opinion that Johnston should take advantage of that. You told me that he's actually nosing.
Yeah.
He should have taken advantage of the fact that Buell's a slow, uncertain, gosh darn, I don't ever really want to do anything, and sort of do that to Buell and then get his ass over here.
Right. Well,
and he seems to go the opposite way in terms of I need to be there to intimidate Buell.
Right. I think he certainly could have left Hardy. Hardy was capable of doing what he needed to do, and should have. I agree. Should have come here. On the Buell thing, I think maybe sometimes we look at what we know of Buell, maybe from Shiloh and Perryville and elsewhere, in terms of.
Buell's not hesitant. Buell is of the same mold as Halleck, and McClellan
That same
Methodical.
school.
He's methodical.
Franklin.
The same school of training.
They're methodical. They've grown up in a military culture that does not take risks. The risk takers kind of stand out from the old Army. When Robert E. Lee, who's an engineer and cut from the same mold, turns out to be the most aggressive commander of the Civil War. In early 1862, there are an awful lot of Confederate soldiers, Confederate military men and West Pointers who are surprised at that.
Call him Granny Lee, you know,
Yeah.
and King of Spades and all that.
And Johnson's decision to send a force here but not come himself or not take his army here is kind of an illustration of that old Army culture. They all study and revere Napoleon. He's the military mastermind of the 19th century. And yet they don't really understand or fight like Napoleon. Napoleon in Italy in 1796 would have taken his whole army, rushed here, fought Grant, left a minimum screening force in Bowling Green. If you're outnumbered by converging enemy forces, your job is to go defeat those forces one at a time. And you see many Civil War generals sort of paying lip service to that culture because they've read Jomini, they've certainly. But even Halleck, who translates military, translates a lot of Jomini, paraphrases a lot of Jomini, devotes as much effort in his military works to engineering and field works as he does the art of war. So
I understand what you're saying, but Buell seems to be a special case because in Tim's books, the quotes that you're getting from Buell are, well, "I don't want to do that. I don't want to
Well,
cooperate.
he's McClellan.
I'm not doing that."
He's McClellan without the charisma.
and also bear in mind that we're talking 1861, 1862. Look at the guy he replaced.
No,
The man who went to
Insane Sherman.
pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think I think maybe we look at Buell. We know of Buell of later. I'm not sure Johnston knew that much because he was a captain under him and had never had the opportunity to command large forces, and maybe didn't know at that point what maybe he would have done. Does that make sense?
And I certainly concede that I'm influenced by Buell of Perryville because I simply can't believe what I'm looking at.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing about these guys is that they only had one military theory class in the whole West Point, didn't it? It was just one class.
One semester.
Yeah, one semester.
So anyway, I'm not trying to contest.
No, I understand. But what I'm saying, we just can't project what we know now, hindsight, on what Johnson would have known then, because he didn't have a lot.
You may not like this connection, but I see Grant and Buell with one similar vein. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I don't care what the enemy is doing. And that's exactly what happens during the Perryville campaign. Buell plans his operation based on what he wants to accomplish and is not flexible. I think Grant early, he's aggressive. He's confident. He's going to do what he wants to do, and the enemy will conform to what I'm doing, not the other way around. That's what I meant by that. That's the only maybe similarity I would say. I am not nearly as harsh on Buell as you are.
Grant thought highly of him.
Yeah,
exactly.
Grant thinks highly of him enough to offer him a job later in the war.
Yeah.
So,
which Buell turns down.
Yes, Buell turns down because he's a stubborn
I'm not
coot.
going to serve under. He writes a public letter that's printed in the newspaper.
Yeah, which is
That
hilarious.
really kisses Grant on.
But if you read first-person accounts of his soldiers at Shiloh, they like Buell. He's out there. He's out in front. He's brave. He's pushing soldiers forward. So he's fairly successful. He just doesn't know how to also deal with volunteers.
Where's this?
Buell at Shiloh. First-person accounts of soldiers in the Army of Ohio are like, we kind of like this dude. He's kind of brave. He's out front. He's helping us out.
That's the other factor I think that we tend to admit, especially early in the war. All of these guys are really unsure how their men are going to fight.
Sherman hates volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're, they've seen volunteers in Mexico be undisciplined and poor fighters. They don't trust them. They want much more training. They want to turn them into regulars before they go into battle. And nobody has that much opportunity.
Yeah. Yep.
All righty. With that stage set, then let's get into the fighting. Let's move over to the February 13th fighting at Maney's Battery, and rather than, all of you have been up to Maney's Battery, and rather than hiking up that hill again, I don't see any need to necessarily do that. We're going to take it kind of from the Union viewpoint and look at what most historians have said and where the attack maybe actually came and so on. Look at the lay of the ground and all of that, and we'll come at it from that angle rather than in the Park Service part.
Yeah, because I've been up to Maine. I'd like to see the other side.
In the subdivision, you've not been up in the subdivision and
Not really.
all of that. Okay.
No, we saw
Let's
what
say it that way.
point that was.
Where the house
Right,
is.
salient point, yeah.
One thing I've always wondered about is, Grant's famous story in his memoirs where he's, tearing Pillow apart and talks about the Army story about Pillow putting the entrenchments the wrong way in Mexico. Do we know if that actually happened or if that was just an Army rumor that everybody, since they hated Pillow, would just, jump right in on? I've always wondered if that actually happened.
I don't know what Nat Hughes said about it in his book.
I'm
not
trying to
read
recall now.
the whole thing.
What I mostly carried away from Nat Hughes' book is Pillow's time as the Army of Tennessee's recruiter, basically rounding up deserters and stragglers and doing a really
Conscription and all that.
phenomenal job.
Doing too good a job. They got mad.
Yeah. But I honestly don't remember what he said about the Mexican incident.
And but there are a lot of stories like that. The whole Bragg, arguing with himself and,
Yeah.
and so on, which may be wives' tales and may be true. Who knows? But Grant, of course, in his memoirs, and you have to watch the memoirs, of course. But he said that he was thinking at the time that I knew Pillow was in charge, and I knew I could walk right up to the Confederate entrenchments and they wouldn't hit me. There is a train of thought. Tom Conley brings out, and Larry Daniels supports this as well, says that had Floyd been on his toes, and Pillow and Buckner and the rest of them, that they should have met Grant out between Fort Henry and Fort Donelson, maybe at Paytona Furnace or
Again,
that ridge, Pumpkin Ridge,
Napoleonic
and
sees the
so on.
initiative, catch Grant on the move.
On the move, and not let them settle in.
Grant's got troops scattered in 3 or 4 different places.
Yeah.
And based on the terrain, it's only a few miles apart, but we know from the marching that it's actually a day or maybe 2 days apart in some cases. But Floyd's not the guy to do that.
Floyd's not the guy. And,
Floyd would be the exception that proves the rule on your every general had a good day.
yeah,
I can't
maybe
think
so.
of anything
Yeah, it's
for
tough
Floyd.
to, he's tough
Okay.
to find one.
I might have to do some back research on that.
Well, he passed a piece of legislature and, maybe not.
All right, let's head out to Maney's Battery. Tell you about what we saw. All right.
I think there's a road that goes that way.
Well, kinda up there by the subdivision.
Easy way,
This
yeah.
is the
This is-
easiest
yeah.
way. Yeah, that other side.
I'm
is-
all for it. I'm all for it.
Well, we're going hiking up. We'll do some hiking.
Yeah, he's up for
All right.
everything.
This is Indian Creek, the valley of Indian Creek, as y'all are well aware. On the other side of Highway 79, of course, it becomes the backwater and so on, it's just sheet of water.
So the river's that way.
The river is that way, yes. Flowing east-west, that's basically north that way, that's south. Actually, as the Federals arrive, they will, Smith's division will arrive along where the hotel is and McDonald's and all of that. McClernand's division will peel off over onto this road, and this is actually where Forrest, and that's the Forrest tablet, I believe, it's where they commemorate Forrest, will actually confront some of McClernand's troops on this road. So they're coming in on a couple of different avenues. That's on the 12th, of course, and there's no major fighting on the 12th. There's some skirmishing and so on. But the Federals are basically just moving forward and kind of approaching and feeling out the Confederate lines and so on. Then on the 13th, we have the first major assaults against the Confederate lines. And you will see on this map that the blue and the gray map on, mark this, and I'll show you in the book. On the 13th, C.F. Smith will make some slight attacks. It's not a full-fledged assault by any means, but some of Lawman's troops under Smith and 12th Iowa and some of those folks will actually move forward over there where we just were, of course. The main attack, though, will come here against Maney's salient, Maney's battery up on top of the hill there east of Indian Creek. You get into a little bit of politics and post-war stuff here as well. Grant really bites McClernand for making this assault. Grant says, we didn't want to assault, I gave no orders for an assault, and McClernand disobeyed orders, and he went ahead and he assaulted and did his thing. So, well, Grant doesn't like McClernand, obviously. Already this early, he's starting not to like McClernand. Now, what does Grant say about C.F. Smith making the same basic movement, assault, without orders, unauthorized? What does he gripe about C.F. Smith? Anything? Doesn't say a thing about C.F. Smith, who did the same thing McClernand had done, because Grant likes Smith and is in awe of Smith, basically. You all know the story about Smith was the superintendent of cadets, I think, at West Point when Grant was actually a cadet. So he's an old guy and a crusty old general and so on, revered by Grant and all the younger guys. And so Grant's not gonna step on him. In fact, when Grant's put in charge of Smith, Grant's kind of in a little bit of a ticklish position here. I'm commanding my former superintendent of cadets, and Smith basically tells him, hey, that's the way the mock flops command me, no problems whatsoever, which, for the crusty old Smith, that's quite a statement. So
yeah, given how many Civil War generals are prickly about issues of rank and standing.
Exactly.
I think that's very commendable.
And Smith actually had been, he's way up there. He's very revered. In fact, I was doing something with Johnston the other day, and I think it was this whole squabble about the Confederate full general ranks. There are 5 Confederate full generals, and the legislation in like March of '61 that allows Davis to appoint these 5 generals basically gave him some loopholes on how he wanted to appoint them in their rankings. And Joseph E. Johnson said, well, I was the ranking general among these 5, so I should be the ranking general among the Confederates. And Davis said, well, you were actually a member of the staff rather than the line, and so we're not going to, these are line positions, so that really doesn't count. Of course, Davis doesn't like Joseph E. Johnson. And so he wants to do it also he says, I'm going to do it by date of rank of graduation from West Point as well. That's another factor in it. And so that puts Johnston a little bit farther behind as well. So it turned out with Samuel Cooper as the top guy, and then Albert Sidney Johnston, and then Robert E. Lee, and then Joseph E. Johnson, because Joseph E. Johnson graduated, 2 or 3 spots behind Lee in the same class. They're in the same class. So Davis says, well, that puts you 4th, and then throw Beauregard in, as 5th. So Johnson just rails against that, and that doesn't help him in the eyes of Davis, of course. But it was in dealing with Joseph E. Johnston's appointment as Quartermaster General, which holds a Brigadier General position. I think the Secretary of War nominated 4 names for that position. And this is like in 1860, I believe. And Jefferson Davis, of course, was I believe the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, or what today is the Committee on Military Affairs. And Davis actually supported Joseph E. Johnston for the position. And there's some supposition that he did that because he knew it was a dead-end position, staff rather than the line, and was holding Albert Sidney Johnston, his friend, for something better. But it was Albert Sidney Johnston, Joseph E. Johnston, Robert E. Lee, and who was the 4th? C.F. Smith was the 4th that was in line for potentially this position. So the point is, C.F. Smith is way up there, and Grant's just not going to say anything bad about him, while at the same time he gets McClernand for doing basically the same thing.
Politician.
Is there a difference in casualty rate that in some way partly justified? There was a little bit more of a skirmish, a little bit more.
There was a little. It's more of a fight here, obviously, and there's some fairly high-ranking officers wounded in this. So That could have played in it a little bit as well, but the hypocrisy is pretty blatant in the middle of the whole thing. Now, in terms of where the attack takes place, you can see you all know how high the ridge is, though. You really can't see it with the woods here. But what this ridge does, it's not just like a volcano, like a knob. It is the top of a ridge that culminates there, that runs kind of to the southwest. Excuse me a little bit. And you'll see this as we drive. We're gonna drive up on that ridge, and I'll show you. It's right in the middle of a subdivision, so I hate to kind of get out in somebody's front yard, you know, and talk. But you'll see what I'm talking about here. So this ridge kind of runs at an angle to the southwest a little bit, and the Confederate line will run right through here up these Tennessee regiments, the 10th Tennessee and the 53rd. We were talking about it yesterday. I believe it is the 53rd Tennessee. To Maney's battery, and then off the other side down toward Aaron Hollow. Now, there's several pieces of evidence here that are in conflict with what has always been basically shown as the line of attack. And if you look at this map from the 13th, you see that the I have to get my glasses. I can't read this thing. The 48th Illinois, 17th Illinois, 49th Illinois are all attacking across Aaron Hollow, basically from the southeast toward kind of the north, or even a little bit to the northwest. You see what I'm saying there? In reality, the attack came up. Do you see where it says Sandy Road there?
Yeah.
Not the Sandy Road that we're on, but the little branch off here. The attack, I believe, comes up more from a southwest to a northeast orientation. So, anybody got a pen?
Yeah.
Let me see a pen. Let me redraw this kind of. So instead of like this, these units would be more like this, coming along this ridge like that.
That would make sense for terrain.
For terrain.
Because you're not going right uphill, you're going on.
You're going up a more general slope. Here's the map that I drew in this. Now
why did you come to that conclusion?
Why did you come to that way? Yeah.
I'll tell you in just a second. You see 48th Illinois, 17th Illinois, 49th. Coming up in this viewpoint, now you've got 45th Illinois, lead mine regiment of W.H.O. Wallace's brigade will make an attack across Aaron Hollow. It's plain that they come in, you know, kind of on the flank over there. But the bulk of the attack will come in this orientation.
There's another reason too.
What's that?
You're protected by the guns if you come this way. That's French's battery.
You're protected from French's
You won't
battery.
be able to hit these three guys as easily as going through that valley.
Okay. There's a lot of things in this. Hyman actually talks about the major casualties come in what regiments?
10th.
The 10th and
Tennessee.
the 53rd, which are on this slope of the hill. The Union major casualties in this attack. Colonel Morrison goes down. Colonel, what's his name? Falk, F-O-U-K, who was, I believe, 17th Illinois at Belmont. He had been at Belmont as well. Both of them, I think, were former congressmen, and both of them were wounded. If I remember the story correctly, I'd have to reread it in here, but they're laying back there after this attack, and they're laying there beside each other, and one of them asked the other, "How bad are you hit?" And he said, "Just bad enough to get elected to Congress again." Or something like that. So I think this will be my ticket, my $1 million wound. The biggest piece of evidence, I think, that illustrates this, though, is that both the Federals and the Confederates are absolutely adamant. This is when we stopped here, that they take fire. Yes, it's blocking you from French's battery, but they are adamant that they're taking fire from Graves' battery, which is on the ridge up here. Now, if you're, and we'll see this again as we go up that ridge, if you're on the other side of that coming through Aaron Hollow, there is no way that you can see from Graves' battery up here. So put all that together, and there are other smaller pieces of evidence. I'm convinced that this occurs like that. Does it really matter? Well, I mean, for people like us, it does. We want to know where it was and so on. But in the larger scheme of things, I'm not sure it matters that much. But for nerds like us, it's good to know where it is. I am convinced, though, that had Fort Donelson been created as a National Military Park in 1898 or 1899, and Falk or Morrison had come back here and said this is where we were and so on. I bet you they would have marked tablets up on this side of this ridge here and said this is where it is. Okay, so if you got any questions, we'll deal with them. But we're gonna go right up here and turn left and go up into the subdivision and watch as we ascend this gradual ridge up to the top. And I tell you what, we won't stop until there are a couple of turnoffs that we'll do where we stop. And you know, we won't get out again in between people's houses and all that, but where we stop and kind of wait for a second, just across the people's yards and in the woods, just to the left, what will be our left will be the tip of Maney's battery up there. In fact, when we did the hike, Tony, on foot, we had the only place that we had to get permission to get on private property was to cross from the public road, just across somebody's yard to back on park land to Maney's battery. And I asked Superintendent McCutcheon, you know, did he know the folks? He didn't know them, but he said, I'll find out. And so he got us permission to be able to just cross right there. It took like 3 seconds or so, but you know, I don't like messing on people's private land, and certainly without, you know, asking them. So. Yeah, the front.
Especially with a herd.
But yeah, and we had a pretty good group that day, and you know, I can just imagine people. What are they doing on my yard? Why are they marching on my backyard? You know, so,
You kids, get out of my yard.
yeah, get out of my lawn. So,
There's one more. I mean, the War Department tablet says the same thing. We talked about that a
that
little
the
bit
department
yesterday.
does, yeah.
And if we're not going to see it, but the tablet 14, which is in the apex, it faces that direction, states February 13th, 1862, about noon, a federal force under Colonel William A. Morrison deployed in the woods opposite the right and center of this brigade. And this is from Hyman's brigade's tablet. So again, even in the 1920s, they're writing the correct history, but somewhere along the way, this map was based on Mr. Barr's, rest in peace, his maps that he did in the 50s. So yeah.
There are other spatial things that are involved as well. Haney and Morrison were originally on the other side of Indian Creek, and their reports, if I should have brought my volume 7 and read some of this, I guess, but their reports again are adamant and absolutely they correspond with each other. So hello, hi, Superintendent. We were just talking about you.
Oh, that's not good.
Mostly good stuff.
Yeah,
Well, good. How's it going this morning?
going good. We got another beautiful day.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we shop till we drop, so we're going home.
They said they had landscaping to do, so we wish we could help you, but we're
I
tied up.
know.
Yeah,
My wife's got like 20 or some odd yard sales. Her and her girlfriend are hitting, and
Just so you know, I don't actually wish I could help you.
we have a list.
We were asked though by the maintenance crews out there at Hyman to give them a hand.
I bet.
They're like, we can really get this done if y'all jumped in.
Oh, it's my gang? Yeah.
In jest, of course. But
Yeah. But, Hyman's unique, and I'm sure Tim explained. I mean, it was referred to historically as the Forgotten Fort.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You probably remember in the cemetery ledger at Shiloh about the dead from Hyman being taken to Shiloh.
Oh yeah, and there are maps in there, you know.
Yeah,
for
there's a
Fort-
map
Fort
sketching out,
Henry,
and it'll be 29 years ago Memorial Day weekend when I started my internship there,
Huh?
and Woody, the superintendent, put me on to compare the ledger to the Civil War soldier system, which he developed, and I'm going, where's Fort Hyman? What's Fort Hyman? And this cool map. So I get here, and Jimmy Joe, the former historian, everybody has no clue that there is a map of Hyman
Yeah.
in the cemetery register at Shiloh.
Yeah.
And I brought it up in
Nice.
So,
Very cool.
but anyway, y'all have a great day. And again, it was
Thank
great
you.
seeing y'all.
Appreciate it.
See
That's
you
Brian's
later.
son Noah too in there with it. See you later. Let's see. Well, Haney and Morrison, those talk about when they shift to the east, to their right. They will go, I think it's like 500 yards or so. I mean, they're adamant that we move the 500 yards and so on. And I've actually marked it out, you know, Google Maps can allow you to
point to point stuff is awesome.
do stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so from just Indian Creek, and they were on the other side of Indian Creek, don't know how far on the other side of Indian Creek, but just from Indian Creek, if they moved all the way to where these maps say they started from, that's like 2,000 yards or whatever. You know, it's way beyond what they said. You know, they moved, and you have to give a little leeway. You know, to soldiers who say, you know, we moved a mile and it may be a mile and a half or something, but they don't normally miss it that far. Right. So putting them at the distance, and I mapped it out, putting them at the distance that they said they went, which that's all we got to go on. That's what we trust. That's what they said. Puts them right at the base of this ridge, coming on this side of it, just perfect. You know,
well, it's perfectly logical to come from the west and do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Why march all the way over there and then come back this direction?
If you're looking at this as a north-south, then it makes sense to think that they might be doing this. But if you look at it east-west, right, it's perfectly logical.
It's also an easier approach, and that's a big deal when you're walking.
It is, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. When we stop up there at Maintenance Battery, a couple of things to notice. Notice the gradual ascent of the ridge as we're going up to it, but then notice the, I mean, you go straight down into Aaron Hollow, and that is where they would have, would have gone. And so notice the difference in going up and going down. So. All right, let's go.
We noticed that.
Yeah, we.
Oh, have y'all been back in there?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about Aaron Hollow. You go off on the ridge. Yeah. But you'll see it on the road as well.
On the road. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. All right. Now we dive off into
Yeah, it's a steep little drop too.
There's young watching, and you can see the river. This is the Big Bend, you know, and it goes straight north like that, and so you can see the smoke out of the stacks coming all the way over here, you know, and follow it all the way along, and then he pokes his nose, you know, around the corner there. That dude's moving on.
I assume the Columbia had a better field of fire if the trees weren't quite so grown in. I mean, it seems an odd place to put it all the way at the end of the line.
Well, you know, who knows where the tree lines were then, you know, and so on. But
probably all cut.
Yeah.
Well, they did cut the field fire. Hey, that dude is moving. I mean, there ain't much of him in the water.
About the yard sales.
Yeah, that would be. The ironclads moved a little slower than that. The Confederates even went so far, of course, to have markers along the river, you know, blazing on the trees and so on, giving them, you know, various ranges and so on, so they would know exactly how far that boat is, you know, from here, like that orange, you see that orange marker to the left of that boat, so they would know exactly how far things are. All right, you all know about the naval action here. We're kind of backtracking a little bit, but we want to do this in a chronological fashion. So the scene moves to the 14th, of course, when the climactic event everybody thinks is going to occur here at Fort Donelson. What had just happened at Fort Henry? Well, the Navy had sailed up and basically pummeled the fort into submission, and all the Confederates think that's what's going to happen again. In fact, Albert Sidney Johnston is writing to Jefferson Davis and others saying Fort Donelson's not going to hold out long, because judging from what we learned at Fort Henry, this ain't going to take long. You know, it's going to be the same exact thing. Now, it is delayed, of course, until the 14th, because of the damage inflicted on some of the ironclads at Fort Henry. Some go all the way back to Mound City, some to Cairo, and then they have to redo the crews and exchange the crews and so on. And then the 4 gunboats and the 2 timberclads, it takes a while to even get here. The Carondelet doesn't even go back, but it's taken some hits and it's sprung some leaks, and it's leaking pretty badly, and it kind of limps here. As well, the Lexington has hit a shoal, hit a rock, and it's leaking a little bit. So there's some problems with the Navy, but Flag Officer Foote does show up by the night of the 13th. The only gunboat on station on the 13th itself, while McClernand and Smith are making their attacks, is the Carondelet, and she will poke its nose again, like we talked about, around the corner, and come a little bit far forward, and will exchange some fire with the Confederate batteries. And this I regard as a major mistake, because again, what's in the Confederate mindset? What's going on? There ain't nothing we can do about these gunboats. They're going to pummel us. You know, it's a done deal at that point. Even to the point at Shiloh, you know, the orders are issued when the Army of the Mississippi marches out of Corinth. to go to Shiloh, Albert Sidney Johnston and both Thomas Jordan as well issues orders to the Confederate Army to do what? Stay away from the river. Don't get close to the river because of those dreaded gunboats.
Right.
We don't have anything to combat them with. And so Johnston, is thinking this is, when they show up, this is done deal. This is going to be Fort Henry all over again. And so probably they would have been better served just to wait until the whole flotilla was here and then make their attack and let the Confederates be overawed and so on like that. But even on the 12th, but then more so on the 13th, when they make these little reconnaissances, let's go forward just a little bit just to see what they got and see, how the range of their guns and so on. And then they back away. What do these Confederates in these batteries think they're doing? What happens? We had the battle, and we have driven them off. We won a victory. Hey, we can maybe stand up against these gunboats, and morale starts to kind of build just a little bit. Now you have two batteries here. One is called the lower battery, the one higher up here. The upper battery, the one lower down up there, is the more formidable of the two. Got the rifle in it and so on. Called the upper battery, even though it's lower down, it's called the upper battery because it's farther up the river. The lower battery is farther down the river, and even though it's more elevated, it's still called the lower battery. So the attack takes place on the 14th, and everybody is just thinking, we're cooked. Our goose is cooked. The old story about Nathan Bedford Forrest, pray parson, because this fort ain't gonna hold out, kind of thing. Floyd actually sends Johnston a message and says the fort will not hold out for 20 minutes, and we're done. So the exact opposite occurs when the flotilla begins to move forward, 4 abreast. Flag Officer Foote really makes a little bit of a tactical error here. I haven't studied. Have you studied much on naval tactics and so on, in terms of ironclads or anything? But
a little bit, but not a lot.
The basic assumption is to move in, drive ahead, and pound, and that's exactly what Foote does here. And he gets a little too close because a lot of these guns are little 32 pounders, which are comparatively smaller guns and only do damage when you get close in. Foote would have been much better off to stay back and keep his the bows of the boats focused on the
smaller target, heaviest armor.
Pummel them from a long distance, where these little guns wouldn't do any damage. But he drives in too close and absolutely gets pummeled himself. And each of these boats starts taking damage. The steerage is shot away. The pilot houses are hit, and they just start bobbing and wheeling and floating basically with the current out of the situation.
I don't remember the gunboat armament, but they have more rifled guns and heavier guns.
They're like 42 pounders at the front, at the
The
bow.
bow guns are mostly like 8-inch and 9-inch dog guns. They definitely
They're
outweigh
8
these
inches in
things.
the
Yeah,
bow.
oh yeah.
I think, and
absolutely.
at this point of the war, I think they're all just similar armor.
Foote has
Yeah.
both range and power.
Exactly.
Three in the
Yeah.
front,
Yeah,
4
because
on
he's
each
got
side,
12,
2 in the back.
12
Three in the
guns
front's
in
Yeah.
that forward firing arc.
And they
they're
were
all like
variations
8
of
inches
8
or
and
42
9
pounds.
And he
They
closes
had
what,
heavy
400
armor.
yards?
It
Is
closes
what-
way too close and takes the hit for it.
The other thing that happens when you watch the barge come up is that you realize that the angles are wrong. Right? They talk about how so much of it is overshot. Well, that becomes obvious when the barge is right out there and you're looking at it and you see, okay, no way they're going to drop it in.
Exactly. Yeah. I like Foote's quote. He writes his wife immediately after this. He said, "I've learned my lesson. I'll never drive in close like that. I think like a child fears a hot stove or something like that. Like, I got burned once. I ain't getting burned again."
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So it really kind of turns the tide, and then the messages start going out, of course, that hey, we've won a glorious victory. We have held tight.
Tim, I have a question.
Yes,
I don't
sir.
know if you know the answer, but when they were damaged, did some of them lose steering? Did they lose their
Oh yeah,
ability?
absolutely. And they would
Definitely.
just swirl and twirl, but the fortunate thing here is, of course, that because the river flows that direction, they will float out of
Yeah.
danger. It would have been very interesting had the river flowed this way. I suspect the Confederates may have captured some of the damaged vessels. Boarded them at Dover or something, and who knows what might have happened.
And did
then.
the people on the boats, they have small arms? They have muskets?
Yes, they will have small arms and cutlasses and pistols and so on to combat that. In fact, there are several examples of fearing that the boats will be boarded in the Vicksburg campaign in Steele's Bio.
Oh, yeah.
They'll talk about greasing the sides and prepare for boarders. Like the old pirate.
No, they didn't have
Like
Marines, right? It wasn't like the Navy and
No,
the
it doesn't
Atlantic.
have Marines at this
Yeah, I'm not aware of
point.
any Marine detachment that's sent out
They
here.
will on occasion have infantry companies detached aboard the boats. But yeah, here comes our staff ride. So
Yeah.
we'll get out of their way and head out and give it to them.
No, they're going to stay over there.
Huh?
They're going to stay over there.
We got the bench, so we got
We have secured the bench.
Really?
One more point here, of course. Once the river batteries hold out, it's kind of a aha moment a little bit, and it's almost like y'all seen the movie Apollo 13 when they finally disengaged from the service module, and Jim Lovell is saying, yeah, the explosion it goes all the way up to the heat shield, and they look at each other like, the heat shield. We didn't even think about the heat shield. If that thing's cracked, we're done. And they have one of those kind of moments here. We held out. Wow, we held out. Uh-oh. We got Grant's army to deal with now, out there. What, are we going to be able to hold out that? The only reason we were kind of holding out there was to give these guys long enough to hold the river, but now that out there becomes the big issue. And even on the afternoon of the 14th is when Pillow and Floyd and others start fabricating this idea of a breakout attempt. In fact, some of the Confederates start marshaling their forces and moving out in that area to start the process. But Floyd says, well, it's way too late in the afternoon, and we may not live through this anyway, so let's forget that. But that night, they redo the process, of course, and we'll talk about it when we get out there and start talking about the breakout. That they start the process of moving back again to the left and marshaling all their forces out there so they can start the breakout attempt. So, yeah, they held out here, which was a surprise to everybody, but the real threat is Grant out there, and that's what's going to eventually get them, obviously. All right, any questions here before we head out from the Army? Yes, sir.
Yeah, when we were at the first stop, we were talking about this in the car. When Smith attacks, he's got like 4 regiments going up that ravine. He's only facing 1 regiment. Was it the ravine that really gave it the advantage to the Confederates?
It's a very steep hill, as we'll see in just later this afternoon. They are behind the fences, of course, and this is a good regiment, 2nd Kentucky. Very well defended there. So there's a number of things. And truth be known, Smith he doesn't really push it hard. I mean, he's not leading with his cap on his sword kind of thing that it will be said he will do later on. We'll talk about that. But it's not a end all be all. If he could break through, sure, but he doesn't send his whole force by any means.
Oh, okay.
For that. It's kind of more of a reconnaissance in force to see what's there, to see how strong it is maybe, and
Test the
what we
line,
can
see
do
if
here.
it's held,
Yeah,
see
see-
what you're
see
going to
how
have to
heavily
do,
it's
and also see the best
Close in with
approach.
within 30 or 40 yards, and they still can't see Confederates to shoot at, that kind of thing too. Is that's 13th, right?
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
But they close in, and it's like we really couldn't see anything to even shoot at.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There are different areas, the nuances of the ground. And so on.
Okay.
Alrighty. Well, let's head out.
We're surrendering the bench.
We're Here's where it gets complicated. And the way we're going to do it is even more complicated. It's like Bragg, when they asked Bragg, how do you attack a battery at the Hornets? He said, Bragg asked him, he said, there ain't no good way. He said, there ain't no good way to see the breakout attempt because it's heavily urbanized, and houses and subdivisions and all that kind of stuff. There'll be a couple places where we'll get out and walk and show you Dudley's Hill, for instance. We'll get out there. But a lot of it is just streets and subdivisions, people's homes and so on. So what we're going to do, go ahead and tell you what we're going to do, and then we'll kind of start the narrative a little bit. When we leave here, we're going to go out and cross Lick Creek, just to show you Lick Creek. I've seen Lick Creek, but we're going to show it to you again. Because the sign says Forest. We got the river. Forest stuff. The river's right there. Then we're going to come back, and there's a road right up here that we're going to go up. Basically, we are at the foot of this ascending ridge that leads up to Dudley's Hill, and then goes along the Wind Ferry Road out along the breakout, the battlefield of February 15th. So that ridge goes to the high point of Dudley's Hill. Yeah, we'll show you on the map here. Show Tony a little bit here. We are essentially on the Charlotte Road. This highway right here is Charlotte Road. We just crossed this little, I don't know if y'all saw it, inlet right here off the river, just right back there, that low ground. Barn Hollow is right here. We're right at Barn Hollow.
Okay.
So we are right at the foot of this ridge that is on the eastern side of Barn Hollow that rises up to Dudley's Hill, which is right about here, where the first action actually takes place with the 9th Illinois and 41st Illinois and so on. And then the action will sweep over, and this map doesn't show, this is just a snapshot in time. What time does it say? Well, it doesn't say a time,
Yeah,
but
it's
it's a snapshot in time. But I'll pull out the book, and it'll show you the progression of the fighting, and we'll look at that as we go along. So we're right at the foot of the hill, right about here, and as the Confederates come out, they will turn and move in that direction. So we're going to go see number 1, Lick Creek, which you see right here. So really what the parameters of the fight on the 15th is between Barn Hollow here, which this is Barn Hollow, the little creek that you see right there that's going right on the other side of the cars. We'll get a better view of that. So between Barn Hollow on the right, if you're advancing with the Confederates, and Lick Creek on the left. And then when you get a little farther forward, what we will get is the parameters between Aaron Hollow, which we saw back at Maney's position here, and Bufford Hollow, which is a little farther to the south down here. So it's a little narrow kind of corridor where this fighting takes place, and I'll explain more about it as we go forward.
So the Confederates are going to be initially deployed, stacked up in column.
Come out of Dover,
Yeah.
through this area, probably even out in here.
But eventually they're going to turn that way.
When they get to where this ridge starts up, they're going to turn and wheel to the right and move up that ridge. Now, what we're going to see, of course, is first of all Lick Creek. Then we're going to come back to a road that is on the far eastern side of this ridge that ascends up there. It's all, subdivision and so on. We'll just go up there and we'll turn around and come back, but you'll be able to see out to the left as we go in Lick Creek in the valley, and you'll see how high this ridge gets up to. Then we're going to come back and go down this road right here and cross Barn Hollow and get into this subdivision, and that leads up to Dudley's Hill, and we'll look at that. And then probably we'll tool around into some more subdivision areas and see some other parts of access points to Dudley Hill and so on. But there's no good real way to really see it. When we did it on foot, Tony, we parked a little bit farther up, came here, and then started in and did it all on foot, but we were just walking through subdivisions most of the way. So it's kind of a shame. If when the park was created, yeah, you want the river batteries and all that kind of stuff, but man, they really should have. This is the fight.
Yeah.
And they should have done this, but they didn't, because A, they didn't have enough money, and 2, it was all wooded and you couldn't get access to it, they said, and all that. So
it's too far.
It's not going to fool with it. Yeah, from where the people come in on the river and all that kind of stuff. So it's a shame that they didn't. But as you see on the Civil War Trust map, the Civil War Trust is doing a whole lot. And I know Brian works with the Civil War Trust and has them working on maybe some other areas and so on. So the Civil War Trust is really doing a wonderful job here on trying to get what, again, Congress should have done 100 and whatever years ago, over 100, 120 years ago, you know. But sadly they
what
didn't.
you're saying, the subdivision is sort of here, here.
Hang on just
Yeah.
a second.
If you look
Yes,
really
there's
close-
subdivisions all up right up here. Yeah, oh yeah, all of this is urban.
On top of that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
From here on, that's all developed on the Confederate line
Yeah, so
system.
really, we're not going to be able to say.
He's asking about
Yeah.
all this other
Not
stuff
at
that
all.
protects his subdivision.
Some of it is, yeah. Okay, now that's the first thing we'll concentrate on, and probably that'll get us to lunch actually.
Okay.
And then we'll and maybe a little bit of a later lunch. I have no idea actually what time it is, but then we'll transition into the fight along the Winds Ferry Road, and that is another area that is very complicated, and there's no good way to see it. Very much, you know, subdivision and roads and so on, or houses and so on along the main road here. You get off into some of these other areas and you get very confused about where troops were, because again, there's no tablets marking, you know, this is where it was and so on. So it's very difficult to tell exactly where everything was, and we'll talk about that.
And the road they're trying to open is the Wind Ferry Road.
No, the forage road. I'll show you that. If you look on your map, you see it, the dot, kind of the brown dotted line right here. That's the forage road.
Okay.
So that's what will lead out that they're trying to open access to. So let's talk just a little bit about background. Of course, you all know the background on this. By the night of the 15th, Pillow and Polk, or Pillow and Floyd and Buckner realize we have to get out of here. And they know Johnston is retreating, getting close to Nashville. In fact, Johnston's forces will reach Edgeville by the 16th, so it's getting, you know, their duty is done. And so they say, let's get out of here. Grant is starting to get reinforcements. They know he's getting reinforcements from the river there. And even though we held out, you know, against the gunboats, we've got to get out of here. So let's turn the Union right flank, the exact opposite from Shiloh. We're trying to turn the left flank of Shiloh. But let's turn this Union left flank, drive them back in order to open up that road that will give us access out of here. Now, miscommunication obviously of orders. Buckner's troops gets the memo about have your haversacks packed and your equipment and all of that, and let's go when we open the door, let's go. Pillow's troops don't get the memo, and they leave their stuff back in their camps and so on, and this will germinate into problems, you know, when the opportunity comes. And we'll talk about that when we get there. So Johnston, of course, is getting in Nashville, Edgefield. He's getting reports of this. He gets reports on the 13th that it looks like, you know, the battle is here. But we held out. By the end of the 13th, Floyd reports he's arrived that morning. He'll report that we held out today. Looks like tomorrow's going to be the decisive day. Well, then he gets the message, you know, the fort won't hold out 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden, hey, we held out. We beat the gunboats. Yahoo, kind of thing. So everybody goes to bed happy that night. The decisive battle then is going to come on the 15th. And throughout the day, Floyd is actually sending messages to Johnston. Like 1 o'clock, there's a message goes out that we're driving the enemy, we're winning a glorious victory, and so on. And even that night, Johnston gets messages that we drove them back, we've won a glorious victory, and all of that. And Johnston is probably thinking, okay, certainly they're on the march. They're getting out of Fort Donelson. There's no need to hang out at Fort Donelson anymore. Then, of course, I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves, but the morning of the 16th, he gets this message that we're surrendering, you know, and Floyd and Pillow are gone. What on earth happened? You know, they go to bed, and what I'm talking about, we go to bed happy, wake up with this terrible news that surrender is offing. The account by Major Munford, one of his trusted aides, they go to bed in Nashville, sharing the same room. He says Johnston is kind of over on this cot, and during the night, early in the morning, they get messages, you know, knock on the door, and they bring in the messages, and Munford reads this, that we can't hold out, we're surrendering at daylight. And Johnston, you know, have you ever been startled at night, wake up and trying to register things, process things, and so on, and And Munford talks about he lays on his cot, kind of on his elbow a little bit, and he says, read that again. And he says, we're about to surrender. And Johnson pauses for a moment and he says, call in the staff. We've got to save this army. And that's when the process starts of getting across the Cumberland, because who knows how quickly these gunboats are going to be coming up the Cumberland. Now, the reason they have to surrender, of course, is what we will develop as we go on in the breakout attempt and so on. But there are large issues at stake here, not to mention the 14 or 15,000 troops that will be surrendered here that could have made a difference elsewhere. And of course, your guy Bushrod. If Bushrod had not surrendered here, he might have been, even earlier available to Johnson to save the Confederate Army. Anyway, all right. That's just kind of a little bit of background. Any questions on?
There's also an attempt on the 14th. We're going to do this very same thing.
A muted attempt on the 14th. Yeah.
I'm assuming Floyd is also sending messages about that potential movement. Is that also?
I would have to look back. I can't remember if the specifics.
Okay.
I don't think the messages get that specific about we're turning their flank and trying to open up a road or anything like that. I would have to look back, but there is a definite effort. And this is what you get down to the soldiers level. They pull all of the troops from not only Buckner's command, Pillow's command, but Floyd's people as well, pull them all over here, and this map really shows it how they're stacking up here, and then make this right wheel. And so a lot of these troops are coming actually over from Buckner's position, back where we were where Smith's attacks takes place. And so you're marching, how far is that? What's that's about a mile right there. So you're marching about upwards of 3 miles. If you're on the extreme limit over here and move to the extreme limit over here, you're talking like 2 or 3 miles. And this is at late afternoon and moving back then on the 14th when they say, okay, we're not going to do it tonight. Well, we better go back and man our trenches then. And then, well, we're going to do it in the morning. So let's go back again the night of the 14th, be there by dawn on the 15th. And so back and forth. And then after it's done, they all move back on the 5th. So that's like 2 or 3 round trips back and forth. And by the way, what's happened to the weather?
Gone to crap.
It's like snowing and inches deep. Where are these guys from? Look at Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama. You folks don't know how little snow we get down here. If you get like that much or even forecast of that much, things shut down. It just absolutely shuts things down. And if you get a snow or so, this winter we got one about, I don't know, it was probably 5-6 inches. We were out for a week, school out for a whole week, and and it got pretty cold actually. The thermometer gets down to, Grant talks about 20 below freezing, and everybody registers as 20 below zero. It's not 20 below zero, it's 12 degrees. It's 20 below freezing. But
That's freezing.
12 degrees.
12 degrees is cold.
It's cold. And you all know, y'all are much more experienced with this than I am. But during the day, the sun may come out and kind of melt things and so on, but you're sloshing through footprints and all that kind of stuff. What's that going to do at night? It's going to harden and sharp edges and make it very difficult. So these poor guys going back and forth, and y'all have seen the terrain that we're talking about. I mean, up Manies, down Manies, y'all talking about how difficult that is. They're doing this in the dark, in the coldest times of the night, and it's just absolutely miserable. Of course, the Federals are a little more used to it. These boys from Iowa and Illinois and so on are a little more used to it, but even to them, it's very rough. I love the account of, I think it's the 12th Iowa guy, and he's talking about, is that the Eagle?
He just left.
Oh.
Might have been.
Another buzzard.
That's not.
They talk about, and Dave, you may run into this. I love it when I run into an account of where they make up orders. You've got the Hardy's tactics orders,
Right.
battalion, left wheel,
Right.
march, forward march, and so on. But these officers, sometimes when they want them to do something, they just make up their own orders, like regiment tear down the fence, forward march, you know, that kind of stuff. And so some of the accounts here would talk about, you know, they would make up orders about in a circle, form a circle around the fire, forward march, and you know, they would just march around the circle. So, but this one guy, just kind of off the top of his head, you know, in the middle of the night and so on, they get these rumors of a Confederate attack or whatever, and all of a sudden he just says, fall in, and the guy says, oh, fall in, and fall in, and it starts going all the way down. The whole army deploys in the middle of the night in the line of battle, and he says, you know, I was just kidding. I didn't mean for the whole army to do it.
I think that's Crash J. Wright who does that.
It may be.
13th Missouri.
And well, there's several accounts of it,
Yeah.
but this particular one, it may be him.
Yeah.
He says, I'm glad nobody knew who the ASS was that gave that, you started that rumor or something. It was me. But these guys are absolutely miserable. This is terrible weather to be operating in. Johnston had hoped that the weather would be his shield. He had gambled that the weather would be his shield and that he would at least make it to March or April. And you know, later in the war, we don't start campaigning. When does Sherman's campaign start? Even the preliminary stuff, March 1st or May the 1st. Certainly May the 7th. When does the wilderness, you know, the overland campaign start? May the 5th.
Matter of fact, it was the Confederate shield in the spring of '64 because April was a very difficult month. They had snow in West Virginia. They had storms across much of the Appalachian chain. So but it was a mild winter in '62 and a fairly dry winter.
But of course they learned their lesson to let's just wait on these things.
Right.
But Johnston's gamble fails. He's not able to use the shield of the weather when Grant starts his operations here in February, which is ludicrous. I mean, what's going on, you know? But in that sense, Grant proves him right. You know, let's go ahead and do this stuff, even if it's hard on the soldiers, hard on us, hard on everybody. But they're just equally hard on them. All right. Let's get in the vehicles. Let's go down. We just cross Lick Creek, find the first place we can turn around, come back, and then we're going to go up on the eastern slope of this ridge leading up to Dudley's Hill. Then we'll come back and tool around in this neighborhood leading up to Dudley's Hill. And if we can, I'm not sure how big the little cul-de-sac. If there's areas where we can park up there, we may walk out into the field at Dudley's Hill and
I think we can fit 3 vehicles there from when we were here.
Probably could. If it's right in somebody's driveway, we probably won't. But and there used to be a park ranger that lived there.
What's the troop strength for each army here? And the 15th.
Grant is getting reinforcements. He's called in Lew Wallace from Fort Henry, and he's getting more reinforcements by river. He's upwards of 20 in the 20s, 22, 25. By the end of it, he'll be upwards of 28,000, I believe. The Confederates will have no more at any time probably than about 17 or 18,000, and probably in this flanking movement that starts the attack, I would guess 10, 12, 15, maybe not even that much. But they are after the principle of war, surprise. They want to surprise the enemy, which they actually do, and achieve the surprise here. All right out. Y'all ever do when you were a kid, the old picture book where you hold it and flip it like that and it does the thing? I wish we could do it with these maps, but I do that sometimes when I do a talk on this. I'll do all these maps on a PowerPoint and just click them real quick, and it's like it's in motion, you know, where the lines are moving and so on. But this is the initial confrontation, and of course where we started was Barn Hollow. We were right about here at that parking lot. So the Confederates will move out this way, turn to the right, and start up this ridge. The first road we went on, did y'all see those good views of Lick Creek out to the left and that pink house and
we did.
all that kind of stuff? All right, then when we came back, we went right up Barn Hollow, then crossed Barn Hollow. I guess y'all recognize that, and then went up into basically this subdivision here. Where we turned around, where the basketball goal was and all that, would have been right about here.
Where the 26s are at, right? Probably.
Yeah,
So I'm
right,
looking
right
at the
in,
other
right
one.
in that general area.
Yep, okay.
Then we came back, crossed Barn Hollow again, and then when we went up to those folks that had the driveway, turned around the driveway, and I told the folks in my car, watch that telephone pole. You know, it's got the transformer on it. That's that telephone pole right there. So we were just
right over there.
right there where we turned around. So the point of all that was to show you the ridge that ascends from the connection of Barn Hollow and Lick Creek here. This ridge in between that ascends up to Dudley's Hill. We saw that from several different angles, you know, driving on it. So that will lead then to the confrontation, which is MacArthur's brigade of C.F. Smith's division, which C.F. Smith's division is back on the other end of the line, but it's been detached because McClernand calls for, he needs reinforcements. He can't reach Lick Creek, and the whole idea actually is to reach the river. What he's really wanting to do is reach the river, but he has no way near enough troops to do that. But he doesn't even reach Lick Creek, and the high ground is still open, so he calls for reinforcements. They send MacArthur's brigade of 3 Illinois regiments, the 9th, 41st, and 12th. And of course, these will be very famous later at Shiloh. The 41st Illinois will be Julius Wraith's regiment in McClernand's division. The 9th and 12th will be in MacArthur's brigade of, W.H.L. Wallace's division. So they're the ones that fight out near the Johnston death site. The 9th Illinois loses, what's the numbers? 366 out of 578, I think.
They're the highest casualty rate at Shiloh.
Highest casualty regiment at Shiloh. So these are the initial ones that are hit. And the initial fighting, and this all takes place right about daylight, little after daylight. But a surprise is achieved. The Confederates will move up this ridge where we were, of course, in the cars, and hit MacArthur here on Dudley's Hill. Now, where exactly? And this was kind of a little bit of what Brian was mentioning yesterday. Where Dudley's Hill is, I've never been able to actually pinpoint the highest ground. Probably you were talking about the high ground. We were on about the highest ground. Probably the highest ground is this little knoll right here, and we'll see it as we go up. Whether that's actually Dudley's Hill or all of it is Dudley's Hill. There was also a house that I marked right here, a two-story white house that figures prominently in the fighting, and you know, some skirmishers and so on manned the upper story, and you can read all about that. But that's the house right there. Where the house sat, I don't know. You know, it's one thing to figure out where Grant's headquarters, the Crisp House, was. That would be cool. If I had extra money and I was the superintendent, I would try to find where this house was. Sure. Because it's probably been a lot less disturbed, and you have a better chance of finding where the foundations of this house than probably over there. And B, that one's mentioned in the literature, in the contemporary literature and so on, but it didn't figure in the fighting. You know, I mean, sure, it was Grant's headquarters, important and so on, but this figured prominently in the fighting, and you could do a whole lot of pinpointing of regiments if you found that house. You know, the foundations of that house, because they talk about, you know, we deployed on this side of the house and that side of the house, and some of our, you know, men were here and there, and so on. So that would be really cool. That I wish they would, you know, do something up here, but you'll see it as we go forward. Now, what the Confederates will do, this is Pilla's fight with Bushrod Johnson aiding him, just kind of tagging along a little bit, basically. But basically, 5 brigades. John Simonton, 1st Mississippi, will be on the right. He has with him the Texans and the Kentuckians. In the center, the 2 26s we talked about, the 26th Mississippi, 26th Tennessee. That's William Baldwin. He's colonel of the Mississippi colonel. Then Drake's brigade, he's colonel of the 4th Mississippi, Joseph Drake. And you've got the 15th Arkansas, and that's the different 15th Arkansas, the 2 15th Arkansas. This is the other one. 26th Alabama, 1st Tennessee, and then you've got the 20th Mississippi involved in here as well. And then the 2 Virginia brigades under McCausland and Wharton that came with John Floyd from from Virginia, from Western Virginia, along with the 20th Mississippi. The Mississippians were part of that brigade, so they're deployed behind. So in somewhat similar to at Shiloh, the columns of stacking up the columns like at Chancellorsville or Shiloh, a little bit of that done here. But they will slam into MacArthur's brigade here, and there's heavy fighting out in these fields around this house. But eventually, the gist of it is that MacArthur's brigade begins to be driven back into this area, where you start to get into the next brigade in line, which is Richard Oglesby's brigade, which you see here, all Illinois, of course, 31st, 30th, 29th, 8th, and 18th. This will be the Oglesby Hare Brigade at Shiloh, which Richard Oglesby is not at Shiloh. He's later governor of Illinois and so on, wounded dreadfully. They thought dead, mortally wounded.
I was going to try and go into
Corinth,
his house.
but
his house is a museum in Decatur.
oh, really? Is
but
it?
It's not open right now.
Not open now. So, but he lives through the wound at Corinth and goes on to become governor and so on. So, but we'll pick up the action as it uncovers. The dominoes fall on down the Union line. So right now we're concentrating on MacArthur's brigade, which the tablets here, and you talk about where were they supposed to be in the 1932?
Again, I have to grab the map. I think one of them is supposed to be much further down Winds Ferry Road, because I think it's this movement one. Because that's just a generic. We were at this position.
Well, they were on the other side of Indian Creek to begin with, so that
I think that's supposed to be way down that way. And I'd have to look.
Okay.
I'd have to look. And there's supposed to be other ones here that aren't here. They're at another place. So
Really?
yes, yeah. This one's confusing.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
The sign as we turned down this, if I'm remembering correctly, identified this as Forge Road. Is this a historic trace, or is?
No, I was going to wait and save that till we got back and got the fighting here, but actually the historic trace of the Forge Road will come right across here, and if you look right here, excuse me, you will see the trace of the Forge Road. Now, what key is here, and we'll go ahead and deal with it since you were very perceptive and good segue into it. This is the avenue of escape for the Confederates. This is what the Confederates are trying to get to open access to and drive these Federals back from. And once they do it, of course, they gain access to it. Now, you can't, if you drive the Federals maybe back to the nursing home here or whatever, that doesn't give you probably good access to it. You got to drive them farther than that to get really good access to get your whole army out of here. So the fighting will, of course, continue. But this is the road that we're looking at, and we can move down it a little bit, while we're sprayed up and so on. We can if you walk down it. Have you been down?
No, I've not.
Way. We can walk
That's
down it a
one of those
little
things
bit.
I'd love to do, because you can follow it. From what I gather, you can follow it pretty decently.
All the way down
Down
into
to
the
Lick
valley
Creek.
of Lick Creek,
Yeah.
but of course it peters out thin.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can follow it through the ridge all the way down the hill. So. All right, let's start with Dudley's Hill, and then we'll come back and look at Forge Road a little bit. Daryl, let me put this in here, maybe hauling it around. I would have to look at the trust map. Some of this back in here has been bought. I'm not sure. Okay, there we go. It's maybe catty corner,
Right. I see.
you could wind your way through there probably and stay pretty much on trust or park land. Are y'all good with going on? Okay.
Sure. Everybody be careful of the unseen divots down there.
Lines of battle work. Now, in terms of where I would guess they would be from this top of the hill here, kind of the crest, along this this crest right here. You know, you talk about the military crest and so on. Certainly when they form their lines, they're going to be, you're not going to form back here, and when they're coming from that direction, you know,
A little late.
where are they? We can't see. Now they are a little bit surprised. They don't have a whole lot of time for this. Now the camps, the bivouac sites, you know, may be a little bit farther back in here, but still then, you know, if you're going to be watchful, you're going to be up on the top. You can see that from Shiloh, you know, where the campsites are marked and so on. Rarely are they, you know, down in low swells and stuff like that. They're normally right on the tops of ridges. So if I had to guess, I would guess they're camped along this high ground here, overlooking the Confederate advance there, and certainly where the lines of battle are.
They don't have camps here, do they?
They bivouac. They don't have tents, but
right.
they bivouac here the night before.
They did.
In fact, they arrive. They fuss about it. Arthur fusses about. They're ordered here, and they arrive after dark on the 14th. So they don't know what's out in front of them. They hadn't had a chance. The first time they see it at daylight, it's full of Confederates. You know, and so that puts
they're
them
out beyond McClernand's line.
Yeah, Oglesby's brigade will stop about where we park.
Okay, so they're being
And so
extended.
they
They're not
extend 3 regiments farther out
Well, I can
in
understand
here.
his concern.
Yeah, trying to get to Lick Creek, which is back over there.
Yeah.
So again, you know, I wish the veterans had been able to come back and pinpoint some of this, but the best we can do is just a little bit of conjecture, you know. So,
Now this would be a place for battlefield archaeology.
yeah, you could certainly do this.
Battlefield what?
'Cause I
Battlefield archaeology.
don't think much of this probably has been disturbed. You know, there's a light line that runs through here and so on, but
I bet if you burned all this, you'd see a lot.
probably may.
So
may
Tim,
be.
on the map,
Okay.
just so that I get some clue. Oglesby, I got. Okay, I understand that.
Right.
MacArthur, is this too far away, basically? I mean, more like this, maybe? See what I mean?
Yeah, I haven't noticed that, but he's got MacArthur
Way out.
way out there, and they're not out that far.
So it's more like a twist
It's
back
more probably right in here. And again, this is a snapshot. I would guess this is more up to 8 or 9 o'clock
Right.
in the morning. But what he's probably trying to show is that MacArthur has fallen back, but I don't think they're out there that far. We're right about in
That's what I
here,
thought.
probably.
Okay, I'm with you.
Right about here. So.
That fits the logic of the ground.
In fact, well, you see 41st
Yeah,
Illinois,
no,
12th
this is
Illinois.
back, right.
That he's got them here, but I don't.
That's later.
And I'm not sure what he's got. Oglesby.
That's got to be
Darryl
missing.
were talking about that.
Yeah, that's the 4 companies of cavalry out there, and they're not. They were attached to Oglesby Brigade, right? So maybe that's why he has that listed that way.
Yeah, I don't know. They weren't out there.
That doesn't represent infantry.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So those four companies that are out there, those Union 4 companies, I mean, are Confederates even saying anything about bumping into them or anything along those
No, they
lines?
don't say anything about it, and I'm not. I would have to go back and look and see what I said
No,
about
that's
it
fine.
actually, but I don't get the idea that they really played a major role. In fact,
Any?
maybe they're more on the flank than out front.
Yes, everybody.
Okay.
And while the Confederates are coming from this direction, they may be more this direction.
I think that's right. Before starting to reread your book, I reread Gott's book, and I seem to remember him saying that the cavalry was just kind of doing nothing out here, and
Yeah.
not really contributing anything to
Right.
anything that's going on.
Right. Yeah. All right. Let's head up. Y'all want to go on?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
We're here now. The tapes are already.
Well, yeah, we can just pick up more.
Just telling them it is conceivable the house might have sit somewhere over here on this high ground. If you look right through here, you see the house. The one on the left right here, one on the right. And we can go through there to the basketball goal if y'all are want to be convinced that this is where we are. But trust me, that's it. Had we stopped and come right through the woods there, this is where we would have come out. Gives you a unique view of the fighting out here and where it was. So, you know, it's hard for me to imagine that the lines were doing this when they were probably doing this because of the lay of the ground, you know. So, who knows? There is some evidence that I think it's the 41st Illinois, was a little bit farther behind, and they moved forward to what I'm talking about, the crest of the ridge, you know. So there's a little bit of terrain description there that you can utilize, but not a whole lot that you can absolutely pinpoint, you know, with any definition. This is where so and so was. But if you had an ancestor in the 12th Illinois or 9th Illinois or something, you can stand here and say this is the area, you know, that your ancestor followed.
Well, you're right. If they could locate that house,
it would help out a lot. And it could even, I mean, that intervening ridge didn't look quite as dominating from the other side as it does this way, but I could see a cabin or a house, you know, on that intervening ridge right there, or, you know, who knows where. Again, it would be like finding a needle in a haystack. Could be done. So there are several little projects like that. I wish, you know, if I had my choice, I wish they would pinpoint something like that at Shiloh. I wish they would open up Ray Field, the long field, you know, to have the view shed that Sherman had at that point. I think that would be cool. But, of course, it takes a lot of extra stuff to do anything with the Park Service.
Right.
So.
And then once you got that field open, you got maintenance.
Yeah. Do what?
Yeah, maintenance once you got it open too.
You gotta maintain it. Alrighty.
wow.
Anybody found any nice ones? You wanna have tick races like they used to do with the last race?
So if we're here, the Confederates overlap this line, right?
Just barely. Forest Cavalry is actually on the left, but doesn't. And you're talking about the Union Cavalry not doing anything. The Forest Cavalry doesn't do anything either. And in fact, they get fed up. You know, Forest kind of.
You'll get comments unless he edits that up.
Oh yeah, probably so. At Shiloh again, for example, he gets tired of guarding the bridge, so he says, "I'm gonna go fight," you know, and gets shot to pieces. Here he says, "Well, I ain't doing anything on the left flank, so I'm gonna go around right behind," and he comes in on W.H.L. Wallace's front there and gets involved there. So yes, they do overlap a little bit, but it's not a major factor.
But is the course of the fighting eventually going to push this way and then kind of turn?
It's more of a hooking. It's not necessarily a push this way and then turn. It's more of a wheel.
Swinging like a gate.
Wheel, yeah.
Ford's Road, in terms of its angle from here, would be kind of across our front, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Down the hill toward Lick Creek. Yeah. We can go walk part of it, and it will help you visualize it. If you'd like to. All right, y'all ready to head back?
Sure.
Well,
Or
actually, the
All right, reverse left wheel.
Because the driver can go get stars and take stuff like that. I was waiting for the helicopter dust off.
Part of the old Forge Road.
with this map, with the attack on Dudley's Hill, with the 9th, 41st, and 12th Illinois, 6 to 9 a.m. ish. Now, as the Confederates begin to swing around this flank, and everything kind of moves this direction, because remember, you've got Lick Creek kind of funneling you that direction, but then you've also got another watershed just to the south here, and we'll go down. We're going to kind of do the similar thing for the fighting along the Winds Ferry Road that we did moving up toward Dudley's Hill, looking around the neighborhoods and subdivisions and all that, because there's not anywhere really that we can stop and talk. You know, we can do it on the side of the road or something, but there's not anything marked down in those subdivisions that we can document. This is exactly where so and so happened and so and so. We'll do kind of like we did on Dudley's Hill, moving up to Dudley's Hill, just kind of show you the terrain and say they move through this area somewhere, you know, but we can't pinpoint like we can, for instance, at Shiloh or something. But what they will do, they will drive MacArthur back, and he will actually move all the way back across Indian Creek. I'll remember where we were earlier this morning. That uncovers, of course, the right flank of Oglesby's brigade, this Illinois brigade, and they will start to turn their flank. And this occurs, if we were right on down this road, they'd be back at the gazebo where we were Forge Road and all that. And there's no need in us just driving down there and turning right around and coming back. In fact, the nursing home thing was just right over that little ridge there. Right. So what you begin to do, move over to the next map. You see Oglesby's defense here, and he will shift his right flank 2 regiments, the 30th Illinois and the 18th Illinois. We'll pull them back and we'll form a defense with the best he can, because everybody's still looking forward, because you still have Buckner in the trenches back here in those trenches. So they're worried about an attack here, but the attack is really coming on their flank. So you got to compensate for both. So we're going to shift our line, form an L, and that most likely, again, there's no tablets out there documenting this is where so and so was, but if you were forming this line, wouldn't you do it on that ridge right there? Sure. I mean, that's the logical place to do it. So when we get done, do what?
Use that fence too.
Yeah, use the fence and get behind these tractors and all that. Get some water out of the fire hydrant. You know, so.
Get some sharpshooters up on that roof.
Use those pallets as, you know.
Okay, we're digressing. You may want to cut all this out, Tony.
Something was in that salad.
Yeah, something in the salad. When we get done, we'll drive down there and turn around right there, so you can see the ridge, and you'll see where we were, you know, with at the gazebo and so on, and you'll see the spatial stuff there. So, long story short, what will happen? The Confederates will continue to drive Oglesby's right now. That's refused, if you will, back, and that will drive Oglesby's brigade farther back. And as a result, you'll start to pick up W.H.L. Wallace's brigade now, which is 11th Illinois, 20th Illinois, 45th Illinois, 48th Illinois. This later on, this will be Marsh's brigade at Shiloh. W.H.L. Wallace will be tapped, of course, as the division command for the 2nd Division when C.F. Smith goes down with a leg injury. So it's no longer Wallace's, but this will be Marsh's brigade. And so you'll start to have that brigade, as we're falling like dominoes, you know, now its right is uncovered when Oglesby's brigade begins to fall away. Now it's here that we have this major defense. Let's go on to the next map. Here we go. By not only the 31st Illinois of Oglesby's brigade, but you will also have Charles Cruft's brigade move forward. And these are Indiana and Kentucky regiments that have been kind of isolated back toward the Indian Creek watershed and so on. Here you see MacArthur kind of reforming a little bit. But Cruft has been sent forward. He's now part of Lew Wallace's division. When Lew Wallace shows up, Grant says, okay, we're gonna make a new division and give you and Morgan Smith, Cruft's brigade, Morgan Smith's brigade, to Lew Wallace. So that'll be the 3rd Division. Of course, Lew Wallace commands the 3rd Division at Shiloh as we continue on in the progression here. So Cruft moves forward and goes into action somewhere on this line, again probably up on the high ground as far as you can get. Now unfortunately there's some friendly fire incidents and so on, and they get involved with each other and firing into the rear of their own troops and so on, and it gets really entangled up there. And following Cruft's brigade, it retreats out of here pretty quickly. We will see Cruft reform and be in action later in the afternoon. Dave, I'm interested to get your opinion on this. For every battle I do, there's always one brigade that just blows my mind, and I can't figure out where they are, what they're doing. It's just a fog. Because normally the commander writes some kind of report like, we went over here, and then we came over here, and then we backed up a little, and then we went forward a little, and it gives you nothing to work off of. Gives you no landmarks or times or anything, and that's kind of like Cruft's here. I honest to goodness, we know we're there, and we get a little bit of information here, but particularly later on, I can't tell you spot on where Cruft's brigade was for anything.
Even what portion of the line?
Because he just doesn't tell you enough to.
He does a better job at Chickamauga, I can tell you.
Does a better job at Chickamauga.
Chickamauga is pretty decent.
It's something similar to Shiloh on the second day with Bruce's brigade of Nelson's division. That they just don't tell you enough. And a lot of the second day stuff at Shiloh, I think it's probably a combination of these guys are so tired after fighting 2 days that they don't remember. All of it starts to kind of mush together in their head, and probably they're tired of writing their reports at that point, and they don't want to go into the details, so they just said, okay, we went over here, and then we backed up a little, and then we charged, and so on, and so you don't get the detail that you need. But there is this stand made by Cruft's brigade moving forward. Cruft's brigade actually will be Jacob Lawman's brigade at Shiloh, if y'all are familiar with Shiloh and want to follow the continuation there. Okay. Then as we move on, get to the position here, as W.H.L. Wallace's brigade begins to be hit, not only by Pilla coming in on the flank, as you see here, the progression, and again, if we wanted to do that kind of stuff, when you follow it with PowerPoint, you can see the progression just perfect. But by this time, Buckner has moved forward across Aaron Holla in this saddle between the headwaters. In our car, at least, I mentioned, if you go down into this, across this road down into that area, that's the headwaters of Aaron Holla. If you go down into this area, that's the headwaters of Barn Holla. So we've got kind of a saddle a little bit between the headwaters, high ground between the headwaters, and that's right here. And Buckner moves out across that area, and so W.H.L. Wallace is catching it, and this is from about here along the Winds Ferry Road, which we're going to see next. Is W.H.L. Wallace, and the tablets, I'm guessing all those tablets are goofed up, Daryl. Is that what you've come to a conclusion?
Yes,
okay. Well, they look cautious. We're gonna.
Well, you get a look at our group.
They got reason to be, don't they?
if I was them, I'd
So W.H.L. Wallace is catching it from the front, from the flank. Even Nathan Bedford Forrest cavalry, I mentioned earlier, has come from the extreme left Confederate flank out here near Lick Creek, ridden around the rear, and goes into action up on W.H.L. Wallace's front. And at one point, Wallace's brigade is catching it from 3 different directions. Both flanks, front, and a little bit even from the rear when Forrest gets around to the rear. Tony, have you gotten the pictures on this? Now, this is where the famous stand is made by the 11th Illinois, the extreme right regiment of W.H.L. Wallace's division. And so while Wallace begins to fall back, carrying portions of this little demi brigade, Morrison's brigade, that was in action against Maney on the 13th, 2 days ago, the 11th Illinois will make this stand right about here. And again, this would be a perfect area for there to be a tablet that says this is where the stand was made in the 11th Illinois and all that. And so we really don't know, but again, look at the ground, kind of you're down a little bit, but now you're kind of rising back up a little bit. And so this is where the Park Service says we think this is probably where it is, and I don't have anything to dispute that. I agree with it. I don't dispute it at all. But the 11th Illinois really makes this major stand and kind of holds out and almost sacrifices themselves, that they're able to hold off long enough for the rest of the brigade to get out. I think it's the 11th Illinois guy, one of the captains. Great stories in here somewhere, I don't know where, but great story about his boys are falling back, and he's trying to reform them, and he's got this sword, and he's waving his sword over his head, and all of that, and they won't reform, and he keeps hollering at them and all that, and he gets so mad that he takes his sword, and he's gonna, you know, kind of show off a little bit, and takes his sword, and he's gonna try to break it over his knee, and it won't break, and it just bends. It's like pewter or something, you know, and it bends, and he tries like a baseball player trying to break his bat, and he can't get it broken, you know, so he puts it over his knee and it bends, and so now all he's got is this bent sword, you know. And what do I do now? So he just waves this bent sword over his head, you know, trying to rally his troops, and it never works. So by this point, W.T.L. Wallace is falling back as well. This little brigade of Morrison. Let's go ahead and just deal with the next map as well. Here you see the progression even farther as Buckner now is morphing into the line with Pillow and Bushrod Johnson. So you see a pretty good Confederate organization here moving down the Winds Ferry Road, and we'll see that as we go forward. Now, what's going on, of course, farther to the rear is that Lew Wallace has begun to move forward with his other brigade, Morgan L. Smith's brigade, and that's where they'll meet, and that's going to be our next stop as we go forward. And that's where we get some major attacks by John C. Brown. Sam's new book on John C. Brown, I'm sure you've seen it.
Yep.
And you get others, Drake's brigade, Simonton's brigade, and so on, moving forward. And then you've got Cruft out there again somewhere that we really don't have anything to give us an idea of. But again, look at the kind of the excuse me, the core area. The Park Service likes to talk about the core area, but the core area of the battle is between Barn Hollow and Lick Creek, moving right up here, and then you skip over this little high ground right here to Aaron Hollow, and so you're moving along Aaron Hollow and the tributary of Lick Creek, Bufford Hollow, and you continue to move on. So this narrow corridor between these creeks and the high ground is where it's taking place. So this narrow corridor that continues forward until the Confederates meet so much resistance, namely Lew Wallace's division that has showed up, mainly Morgan Smith's brigade, as well as the two artillery batteries from Chicago, the Chicago Light Artillery batteries that go in under Peter Wood and Ezra Taylor. And I'll show you where that position is next. So we're continually moving forward, and by this point we're at 12 to 2 p.m. I mean, this takes up a while for all of this to take place. What we're going to do now is move probably down this road. Now this is the road that we went out yesterday. You remember that it got really, we went out in the middle of the boondocks yesterday. We won't go that far. In fact, we won't go as far as Bufford Hollow. You'll see it down to our left, but we're going to go back into a little bit of a subdivision back in there. Then we'll come back, go down the Winds Ferry Road into some subdivisions back in there. And what you're going to see is just up and down ridges going all different directions. And so it's very difficult to determine. You know, like this, we can kind of see where ridges are and approximate. I don't even try to approximate back in here. This is like no man's land. It's very difficult to tell anything. But suffice it to say, they're fighting over all of it. And the general movement is a Confederate movement down this corridor, Union withdrawal, until they meet W.H.L. Wallace and Lew Wallace's new position out there, and we'll talk about that when we get there, and that'll be our next stop. So as we ride around, just look at the territory in this little corridor that we're looking at.
This is a great spot to get a perspective. Can I ask?
Sure.
You got Aaron here, and you have this is what, Buffalo or whatever it is.
But well, this one is a tributary of Bufford Hollow. Bufford is actually a little bit farther down.
To drive everybody against that one little
exactly.
So,
and that's where Wallace deploys.
Basically what's happening is people are sort of being kind of
funneled into, exactly.
And Tim, to your point, tablet 30 should be right here, and it does describe the fighting 11th and 31st Illinois.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So you've got that in your your book. Okay.
That's supposed to be right on this corner.
On this corner.
Supposed to be here.
Yes, tablet 30, and it's one of the missing ones. It's not a misplaced one.
I was gonna say, where is it now?
It's
is it
missing?
Okay.
So it's not in storage or anything. It's just.
Well, it may be one of the 4 in storage. I didn't get a chance to get in there, but I'll touch base with Ranger Fields. But it is a missing tablet in terms of being on the battlefield.
And it was supposed to sit
right
on
there.
this
Yes,
corner
sir.
here. This would be a wonderful area to acquire.
Yeah. Well, they have that
the Civil War Trust is worked on that.
There is
yeah.
a white spot. If you look on the trust map, there's this white spot in the
Okay.
corner. And then it looks like they've got this sliver, which explains these boundary markers.
The boundary.
Yeah, they have this
boundary,
sliver.
yeah.
But this little corner, and I think it's basically to their driveway, that's trust property back there.
Okay. And of course, it's probably been deformed a little bit by the roadways and so on, you know, so it's been a little bit smoother, but by all accounts, very historic ground, that stand made by the 11th Illinois there.
Corner of Nalcor Drive and Ford
What a
Road.
great spot.
Just a sliver
There you
here.
go.
Yeah,
He's got the
exactly.
deal. Yep, he's got edition 1.
Is that the?
Well, that's
not
the
photo
classic
of it.
edition. That's the
No.
one
Yeah.
that works most.
That's the
most
OG.
much later.
That's
the old school.
That's the
So
old
you
school.
have the text, but not the photo. Not the.
That's
You have
correct.
the original text.
I have all the text for all the tablets. Yes, sir.
Wonderful resource for you folks out there that are interested in Fort Donelson. Daryl Smith has a book that has all the original War Department tablets.
Oh.
Contact
Rance-
him,
hey, this
and
is
he
pretty
will.
good.
Oh, that's very
Ransom's
kind of you,
Regiment,
sir.
the
You
11th
really did not have to do
Illinois
that. But that's Daryl at
failed to
walkingwithhistory.com. Get that out of here. Get that out of here.
Just for kicks,
Yeah.
Dave, read to us the
I'll
text
read
of the
the-
tablet
the-
that would have been here, or the
I
pertinent
won't
part.
read the whole part, but Ransom's Regiment, the 11th Illinois,
Tag Ransom,
failed
T.G.
to
Ransom.
receive orders to withdraw. When that regiment retired because of its failing ammunition supply, the 11th took its place, exposed to fire in front and both flanks, charged by the Confederate cavalry on and near the left wing, and by Hanson's 2nd Kentucky on the right. Ransom's command was likewise forced to retreat, cutting its way through hostile cavalry. That damn forest. Which had gotten in its rear.
Don't
The
edit that.
11th Illinois, led by its wounded commander, rejoined the brigade in the deep ravine south of Winds Ferry Road, opposite Maury's Battery, or Maney's Battery. Location: corner of Nalcor Drive and Forge Road.
Is that Thomas E.G. Shot Pouch Ransom? Seems like he always gets injured.
Yeah, he's everywhere.
Yes, he's. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. I'd love to see that tablet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
When you ended,
It's funny how I guess we all have individual ways
Are
of
they
having
far
things
enough
come
away
together,
where
but this spot
they
has
can
told me
use
more about
Ford
this
Road,
battle
or
than any of
do
this
they
spot
still
we've
have to
done.
push it further?
You're a good piece here. You could probably use it. You're still within
Get a
artillery
sense of
range.
what's
If you
happening
could
well
get
here.
a
Yeah, I
position
agree.
to
It's
see
a
that
good
far,
spot.
certainly from this
I-
ridge you could.
I liked being out.
The idea is
on the hill,
if we got them
but-
driving them, we need to drive them
but I was
as much
still
as
floundering a little bit in
as we
terms
can.
of direction.
And
Right,
Pillow,
without
we'll
knowing
talk about
sure
this
which
when
way
we get up there.
everybody's facing,
I think
you
Pillow
know,
has
they're theoretically
started
from the
Placed
crest.
on the ground, and it's really hard
thinking
to do sometimes.
Yeah.
different than just open
Here,
the
you know,
Forge Road and
they're
escape.
coming and
Pillow's
you're
starting to
holding.
think we got an opportunity here to win
battle.
big
Yeah.
and destroy their army. And I mean, he's not thinking. He's losing. You know, one of the principles of war is objective. If you've got an objective, obtain the objective and stick to the objective.
Yes.
Don't keep changing the objective in the midst of it. And Pillow changes the objective from escape, open up escape route, to win the battle and destroy the enemy, which is not possible at this point. But that's Gideon Pillow.
Yeah.
Yep. Don't call him a stooge for nothing. All right, we're going to drive down here on this top of this ridge, turn around, come back, and then we're just going to drive around some of these neighborhoods. So just bear with us.
It's called. Yeah. Yeah, so these should be, I think actually, again, I have to pull out. I think one of these is actually supposed to be over by Mama Mia.
Really?
Yeah.
So this is like way off.
Yeah, and then I think the other one's supposed to be down, like at the gazebo.
Well, it's not that far over the Mama Mia.
Not from here, it's not.
It's Winsbury, okay.
And where we went up to turn, when turned around, that's as far as you could go. It went on straight through the woods there.
The Confederate attack was apparently delayed by having lunch at Mamma Mia's before they jumped off.
They couldn't get them to bring their tickets to them.
Tickets, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me find our map that we made, and then the second one we went down, you see up and down, and just
Oh,
how
yeah,
difficult the terrain was, much less trying to find out where troops were in all of that. You know, it's extremely difficult terrain. The Confederate advance will reach the point probably on the ridge. If you look over here, McClernand actually talks about, or maybe it's Lou Wallace, lets the Confederates get to the low point of the road, and you see, you can, when we go back, you'll see it goes down and then up a little rise, and it's logical. Again, this is where the Park Service interprets this, and obviously there were signs here, whether they're the wrong ones or not. this is the position that Lew Wallace takes to hold them. And it's illustrated by this map. You can see the beginnings of Lew Wallace's line with the 1st Nebraska, Thayer's brigade, Morgan Smith, the 8th Missouri and 11th Indiana. Both are Zouave regiments. So if Peters was here, we could he would like that. And then you got Cruft's brigade down in there as well that forms on the right, and then several other regiments that have fallen back from McClernand's line that go into action here. The 2 Chicago artillery batteries, Wood and Peter Wood and Taylor, also go into action here, and they stop the Confederate advance. This is the famous incident where W.H.L. Wallace is falling back the Wins Ferry Road, and Lew Wallace is coming forward, and they both meet each other, and they're like, "Oh, Mr. Wallace, Colonel Wallace, how are you? Oh, Colonel Wallace, you know, so." And one of them says to the other, I can't remember which one it is, but one of them says to the other, "You know, we were the cause of so much cursing in the post office department because Lew Wallace was Colonel of the 11th Indiana, and W.H.L. Wallace was Colonel of the 11th Illinois, and so when they would get letters from somebody to soldier that said Colonel Wallace's 11th Regiment, which Wallace's 11th Regiment does it go to? You know, so they have a little joke there. But supposedly W.H.L. Wallace says, "Where should I form my troops?" And Lew Wallace says, "Right here." You know, right about here would be good. So the line is formed in this position. Again, I was telling my car, but as we were moving down the Wins Ferry Road, even after we came up out of the little subdivision and so on, where we went and where we turned around, that was Bufford Hollow. The first little dip that we went through was that tributary that went into Bufford Hollow. But where we turned around, that was Bufford Hollow. We're going to see it again down here as we go around this loop. Off to our left here, my left, that's Aaron Hollow. That's the headwaters of Aaron Hollow. Bufford Hollow, you'll see it on over there. So again, we're in this corridor of this high ground where the fighting extends out to this area, and then we'll go all the way back. So the major attack on this line is by John Brown's brigade, the 32nd Tennessee, 18th Tennessee, 3rd Tennessee, that will make the attack across this low ground here up toward this line, and of course will be repulsed. So we got 12-2. If we move on over to the next map, then you start to see the critical decision that is made, and the Confederates start to fall back into their fortifications. Here we got 2 to 5 p.m. Now, what's the crux of this? What causes this? It's all Gideon Pillow. He decides that we have changed the objective, and we're now going to beat them. But they get to this point, and you're stalled. So there's no option now to destroy the Union Army because we're stopped, and they're obviously getting reinforcements up. So what do we do now? And so Pillow says, well, it's probably too late in the day to get out of here. And plus, my guys, this decision, miscommunication comes back to bite them, that we don't have our accoutrements, or well, they got their accoutrements, but they don't have their supplies and their haversacks and all that kind of stuff. So Pillow basically says, well, let's go back to camp, get all our stuff, and then see what's gonna happen. And hopefully they won't follow us back and hem us in again. Which I think the Union forces aren't going to be that dumb. They're going to follow up any Confederate retreat, obviously, which is what they do. And Buckner can see that this is not good. This is not the thing that we need to do. We need to hold this line at least with a partial force, so that we can get the rest of the guys out the Forge Road like we intended, the original objective. Now, Buckner, when Pillow shows up, or when Buckner shows up, Buckner and Pillow get into it, and no, we're not going back in, we're getting out of here, blah, blah, blah. Well, what does Floyd say? Floyd's the commander. So Buckner gets to Floyd first. And Buckner says, we don't need to retreat. We don't need to fall back. And Floyd says, yeah, you're right. We don't need to. And then Pillow says, well, I'll talk to Floyd about that. So Pillow goes and talks to Floyd and talks him into retreating back into the earthworks. And Floyd says, yeah, we'll do that. So it's kind of like, in a baseball game that goes back and forth, whoever bats last is probably going to be the winner. Whoever talks to Pilla last is probably going to be the one that sways his opinion. And in this case, it's Pilla, or whoever talks to Floyd last is going to persuade him, and that's Pilla. And so the orders go out to move back into the entrenchments, which completely eradicates everything that's been done that morning. I mean, why did we do all this? What was the goal in the first place? To just fall back? And Pilla says, well, we're going back to get our stuff, and then we'll get out there in the night, or maybe do this again. We can do this again in the morning. Anybody up for that? Golly, and the supposition is, of course, that the Federals won't follow and hem them in again, and that they're going to be huddled back here beaten. They don't know Ulysses S. Grant. This is the famous incident when Grant shows up here. Where's Grant been all morning?
Upriver.
He's been talking to flag officers.
Downriver, rather. Yeah. Off in the.
Actually gone to the gunboat because Flag Officer Foote had been wounded in the foot, of all places, during the fighting and couldn't come on land.
Foot's foot was.
Foot was in trouble.
It's like his name wasn't Flag Officer Hart.
Yeah, exactly. Or Flag Officer Head shot off. That's like the baseball pitcher named Bob Walk.
Oh yeah.
Grant will come back, and the famous story, he'll meet his staff officer on the bank of the river, who's ashen white, and they've attacked and all that. This is part of Grant's overconfidence. And Grant later actually admits in his memoirs, this is one of those things that you can take to the bank on the memoirs, when Grant admits something, that's a big deal. And he actually admits, he says, I really didn't think anything would happen unless I started it. But they did, and here drew us all the way back. Well, Grant comes to this section of the lines, and he starts asking questions. And McClernand, W.H.L. Wallace, and others tell him, well, we're out of ammunition. Well, no, get some more ammunition. And he starts bringing ammunition up. And then he starts realizing, they start telling him, well, these Confederates that we're encountering, which must have been some of Buckner's forces, have their haversacks on. And it looks like they're, ready for a move. And Grant says, tell me, what is that? Tell me that again. They got their haversacks, which can only mean what? They're going to try to escape. So if we leave the gate open, what's the bull going to do? He's going to bolt. But we better close that gate to the fence, right? And so Grant will order immediate counterattack, and we'll begin to push forward, led by Morgan Smith's brigade, the Zouaves, Cruft's brigade over there, and again you get into the whole, it's crazy. Read Cruft's brigade report.
I will. I'll see that.
It's amazing for its vagueness, and the some of the forces that are here with Thayer and so on begin to move forward. There's a little bit of Confederate resistance, kind of a rear guard under Bushrod Johnson will remain back there with Drake's brigade and a little bit of Simonton's brigade kind of on these hills. Now, again, where that specifically is very difficult to tell, because the ridges don't run parallel to the way you would think to fight a battle, to deploy on, So they may be deploying on sides of ridges and up and down, ravines and so on. So it without the veterans coming back, it's very difficult to tell
It's
exactly. It's shallow-esque according, over toward the river. So it's very difficult. One of the things that's interesting, I think it's Morgan Smith in one of his accounts talks about moving across this valley and up toward the Confederate line, that they ran into rock outcroppings. Have you ever read that account?
Yeah, that's in the OR, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. And I've walked all this land out here, and I've not seen any rock outcroppings. I don't know what he's talking about or any of that. So you ever run across anything like that? So who knows? But the Union line will advance, and there will be some sporadic fighting later in the afternoon. And of course, it gets dark by certainly 6 o'clock, 5:30 or so. So we're getting on toward dark here. But the Union forces will shut the gate. What we'll do from here, of course, is move around this lane and go down. We'll go down the hill again, and if you'll look to your right, just like we did down there, you'll see Bufford Hollow, and that is the southern extent of this corridor. again, Aaron Hollow behind you. And this is the stopper here, you know, where as far as the Confederate advance gets. Bear in mind at the same time, there's also action that Grant starts on the extreme other end of the line. C.F. Smith's division will attack at the same time because Grant leaves here and goes to C.F. Smith and says, move, take, assault. And we'll see the results of that at our next stop over there. Any questions here?
Rough idea where it is on this one?
We are right about here. Yeah, right there. And he's got Thayer and so on a little too far forward for their defensive line, you know.
Sure.
But this may be, I wish he had a time on it. He's showing the counterattack. I think they tried to put it, and this is very difficult. I ran into this on the counterattack, you know, Sherman McClernand at Shiloh. Kansas gave me only so many maps, and I only had one map to devote to the counterattack, and trying to show them moving here and then counterattacking back and so on one map is very, very difficult. And I think that's what they're trying to show everything on one. I promise you the initial up is the hardest part. It levels out a little bit as you get on.
All right. Well, let's see if I can see cool. You do.
I could have driven it. Yeah.
There's a roll.
Supposed to be right in here. One or two of these tablets are supposed to be on the other side of the road. And tablet number 10, don't ask me where it is right now, it's actually around the corner. It's not there, of course.
What's this tablet say? C.F. Smith?
Yeah, this is C.F. Smith, Wellman's Brigade.
Well, that's probably May 13th.
Covers both?
It actually covers, well, no, it covers the 15th.
15th.
I don't see
On
any
February
13th.
15th, blah, blah, blah,
2
blah.
p.m.
Well, Lawman does move forward as well, but mostly it's led by the second hour.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's total. Yep.
they're split into skirmishing wings, so they're on both flanks.
Okay.
Where the colonel is, he might be down
Might
there
be down there.
one battalion and the major or lieutenant colonel with the other.
Bear in mind, the 2nd Kentucky has been spread out, where this used to be a whole brigade covering this.
Yeah.
Everybody has moved over to the breakout attempt, and
Here
so
comes
they're
Pat.
extending the 2nd Kentucky just mere companies, you know, covering what a regiment should have been covering. And so it's a very weak line. C.F. Smith, led by the 2nd Iowa, of course, will break through here, and then move down and even up to another position on another ridge forward, and there's a parking, you know, a park tour place there. You okay?
I'm fine.
All right.
I took the stragglers route.
That's all right.
You made it.
Now this is really critical in the whole
So we
process
needed
of
more ammo.
surrender, of course, because this is what convinces Buckner, particularly. Buckner's really adamant about surrender because this is some of Buckner's folks holding this decision. He's adamant that we got to surrender because Smith, at the end of the day on the 15th, took my lines that easy and it's only a hop, skip, and a jump over to Fort Donelson itself. And he says, I won't be able to hold 30 minutes after daylight in the morning. So we have to surrender if we're going to save, you know, in the name of humanity, any of our troops. Buckner will convince Floyd and Pillow that this is time to do it, but Floyd basically says, I ain't surrendering. I'm a wanted man. You know, they want me for treason. And so he turns over command to Pillow. Pillow says, well, I'm the second most wanted man in the United States, which he's not. If it was up to the U.S. forces, they would let the Confederates keep Pillow because he's better in the hands of the Confederates than he is in captured. So Pillow's blowing himself up again, obviously. But Pillow will give command, of course, to Buckner, and Buckner will open the negotiations, which aren't really negotiations, for surrender. But the attack here late on the 15th is very instrumental in convincing the Confederate High Command that there's nothing else we can do. So the attack here is very, very important. I think what we'll do now is go to the surrender house and finish up, get them surrendered, and talk about the big effects of it and so on. And that'll probably wind us up. We're getting on close to our target time. Yeah. Well, we still got a couple hours, but we got to get back down and all of that. So.
Yeah, getting back down is gonna be a while.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna walk down the road.
You're gonna go down the road
Yeah.
now? Okay.
It's a little easier.
Just as easy.
How close is the road?
It's just
It's a little piece on down.
not far. It's just right over there.
Really? There's a road?
There's an intermediate ridge, and the 2nd Iowa goes on over to that ridge and catches friendly fire from the Federals on this ridge. You know, they're firing into there. I think it's the Indianans that they send word back, you know, quit firing in our rear, but that helped stop the Union advance. I don't think they could have gone on into Fort Donelson that afternoon, but it helps take the momentum a little bit out of.
Aside from the artillery crews, the gun crews, and the heavy artillery, whatever's over there, what infantry is left holding Fort Donelson?
Still have the
30th
Head's
Tennessee.
Brigade, Colonel Sugg, Cyrus Sugg, and Head, and it's like the 49th Tennessee, 50th Tennessee.
Okay, yeah.
There are a couple of regiments still around, and 1 or 2 of them have been moved out and back and forth and so on, kind of as reserve, but there's not a whole lot left back in there to defend this. And there are a couple of ancient like mortar pieces manning the fortifications and so on, but nothing that's going to hold out against, you know, determined attacks by Union divisions or anything. All right.
Good climb.
Don't
I
need
got my
to
breath back.
break,
already.
or you already got
Good.
That's a good start.
Again, it was nothing compared to Billy Goat Hill.
Well, you know,
It was still tough, but
yeah, it's time.
Surrender house, of course, is that when then Buckner shows up, and then Lew Wallace is the first to come, you know, and meets with Buckner, and then Grant comes in, and all that occurs apparently at the surrender house. But the key, of course, is the decision to surrender. And Buckner, Pillow, and Floyd are all here, and they are deciding what to do. And Buckner basically, again, has probably had the tightest grasp on reality the whole way through this thing, and finally convinces them to surrender. Now, had they not surrendered, this is another one of those what ifs. What would have happened? Pillow says, well, we'll just repeat this morning, you know, the next morning, what we did this morning. Now, I don't see that happen. And they send Forrest out. Can we still escape? Excuse me. They send Forrest out to check on the fires. He sees fires, you know, but he says, oh, they're just whipped up by the wind. That's, you know, it's not troops that are occupying it. But Grant has slammed the door shut. So they decide, okay, yeah, the best thing to do is to surrender. What was it? Oh, another tick. Buckner says, well, the whole purpose is to allow Johnson to get across the Cumberland River, and Floyd says, well, I have good indications that has been done, so we're good. So Buckner says, well, we surrender. And Floyd says, well, I turn over command. Pillow says, I turn over command. And Buckner says, I'm writing a note to Grant. And that's what he does. Floyd says, I'm getting out of here. I'm not gonna surrender myself. So he has the steamboats at the landing right here. This is the Dover landing. And he says, we're gonna get the nearest troops on. And it just so happens that I ordered my 2 brigades, the Virginia troops, here that they just happen to be the closest troop. So, Yes. well, there are a few reinforcements that show up and they're ordered right off and just in time to be surrendered. But I think what you're maybe thinking about is the 20th Mississippi, which is part of Floyd's original brigade. There are 4 Virginia regiments and 1 Mississippi regiment. And the Mississippians are told to make a perimeter around the landing so that nobody else can come in. And as soon as we're going on by rank, you know, and we're going to let these Virginia regiments get on. And as soon as we get on, Mississippians, y'all are going to board with us. So the Mississippians, let's form the perimeter, and nobody's coming in. They stood like a stone wall, you know, and didn't let anybody in. And when the last of the Virginians, and not all the Virginians get off, you know, there's plenty of room on the boats, but as soon as the Virginians get on, Buckner sends a note that says if these boats aren't going by daylight, I'm gonna send a shell through them. You got to get out of here. So Floyd says, cut loose, let's go, and leaves the Mississippians. I'm not a big fan of Shelby Foote, simply because we don't know where he got all his stuff, but I like the way he put it. He says they left the Mississippians howling on the bank in disgust from being left on the bank, and of course they are surrendered, and they're not exchanged for several months later. So Floyd gets away. Pillow gets across the river on a skiff, just kind of a rowboat or a raft, and both of those, of course, make their way to Nashville and report to Johnston, and that begins the whole process of the big mess and so on. Meanwhile, Buckner and Johnson, kind of tight there, isn't it? Good to see you. Bushrod Johnson will surrender, and actually, if you look at the federal correspondence and so on, it will talk a lot about, hey, we nabbed Albert Sidney Johnston. We got the big guy himself. And then they go back like, well, it was just this guy named Bushrod Johnson. Not even a T in it, it's just Johnson. And so they're a little disappointed. And then he's not even guarded, and he just walks away, as we've talked about. Buckner doesn't. He stays with his troops, and he wins, I think, undying devotion from particularly the Kentuckians and others for sticking with them and going through this. So the bigger picture, of course, and when they get done, we'll walk down. For those of you that haven't seen the house or the landing, we can walk down there. But the bigger picture, of course, is that Fort Donelson does hold out long enough for Johnston to get across the Cumberland River. The question is whether he needed them to. It's like the Hornet's Nest. Do we really need the Hornet's Nest to hold out this long for us to build this last line of defense at Shiloh? Well, probably not. I'm not sure Johnston needed the fort to hold out this long. Certainly, if they could have gotten out on the 15th, Johnston would have said, come on, boys, get out of there, let's go. Of course, you can't get everybody out. You need a token force that you have to sacrifice to hold enough people back for the majority of the force to get out. But I think there was certainly a way that you could have done that on the 15th, and they just absolutely dropped the ball. And there again, Johnston's subordinates failed him. It was not a pretty picture that day. But it was what it was. The Cumberland is now open all the way to Clarksville, which is nothing, which means Nashville. And very soon, by several days later, Nashville surrenders on the 23rd, I think. Johnson tells Governor Harris, you see to your people. What I would do, first of all, is get the archives out, get the state archives out, and you know, we're leaving Nashville. So big ramifications here, but again, in the whole complex situation, the big stroke has already been landed at Fort Henry some 10 days ago, and this is just ramifications, although big ramifications. You've got Grant rising to hero status. You've got the loss of a Confederate army that's 14, numbers vary, best estimates 14, 15,000 or so surrendered. An absolute morale shocker. I mean, this is just a death blow almost.
Is there a worse command performance in the Civil War? I know.
I don't know. I would have to think on that just a little bit. But it absolutely shocks. I mean, you think about, do y'all remember 9/11? Everybody remembers 9/11. Do you remember the shock of 9/11?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember what, and you watch it on the news, and there were so many rumors and all that. You know, there are bombs going off, car bombs at the State Department, and car bombs here, and there's another plane in the air, and we don't know where this plane's going and all that. Just absolute chaos, pandemonium, and shock. That's what it felt like in Nashville when news of Fort Donelson arrived, that Fort Donelson had surrendered. So not a pretty picture at all.
Speaking of pretty pictures, this kind of looks like it was painted based on a scene from that old cheesy film they used to show.
It could
It
very
looks an
well.
awful like a.
Could very well be. Maybe my 11-year-old painted it. I don't know. So, it's not bad. He kind of. Who has the best mustache in the Army of Tennessee?
Buckner.
Brandon. I knew it was a B.
Oh yeah. Buckner is. We something about that in your book, or
I told him to make it an extra credit on a test.
Alrighty. Want to get a group photo?